My bad, y'all. We back on the crime. Yeah. I wasn't gonna leave you with the crime. Look, I ain't even get the Carmelo out the background. But that's all right. We up in here. So let me get this music on for sure. There we go. We switched the background on them. Let's get that crime music going real quick. Oh yeah. Now we got one involving the Uber driver. So we gonna see what this one about the Uber driver hitting for. And we gonna get straight to it. Y'all already know what time it is. Let me see something. Yeah, I just want to make sure it look good for y'all. We get it big as we can. All right, yeah, that's good. Let's go.
Suspected something was wrong. They just didn't know how wrong. For nearly 24 hours, investigators had been chasing rumors. Every conversation seemed to produce a different version of events. Nobody could agree on exactly what had happened. But one thing kept appearing in every lead they received. This house. 3705 Lillian Street sat in Akron, Ohio. To most people driving past it, it looked like just another neglected property. But to the people who spent time there, the house had become something very different. People came and went at all hours. Drug users drifted in and out. Some stayed for days. Others only appeared long enough to disappear again. It was the kind of place where everybody seemed to know each other, but nobody knew the full story. Witness after witness, one person seemed to have more influence inside that house than anyone else. Danny Hamby. People described Hamby as someone who liked being in control. Witnesses would later tell detectives that he barked orders, intimidated people, and made sure everybody understood who was in charge whenever he was around. But before investigators could understand what happened inside that house, they first needed to understand who they were looking for. Because at this point in the story, Samantha Guthrie was still officially a missing person.
The BNK, what's up?
Samantha Guthrie was 18 years old. Just a few years earlier, her life had looked completely different. She had wrestled in high school and talked about working in medicine someday. Her family still believed she had a future waiting for her beyond the struggle she was facing. But like many young people caught in addiction, Samantha's life had started moving in a different direction. Methamphetamine had pulled her into a world her family barely recognized. In the months leading up to her disappearance, she had started spending time around people and places that worried them deeply. Places like Lillian Street. Even then, her family never stopped trying to help her, and when they realized something wasn't right, they knew, almost immediately. On November 5th, 2018, Samantha's mother, Joni, contacted police. She hadn't heard from her daughter and was becoming increasingly concerned. Under normal circumstances, officers might not have considered that unusual. Samantha was legally an adult, and people in her situation sometimes disappeared for short periods of time before resurfacing again. But this situation came with one detail that was impossible to ignore. Someone had contacted the family and claimed that Samantha had been shot. Not only that, the caller pointed them directly toward a specific address.
LA,
375 Lillian Street.
And she left his house. He said he hadn't talked to her for like 3 weeks, and then he got in contact with her, a little bit on Messenger, back and forth.
Okay.
She went to court once because he bailed her out, took her to court, and then he didn't see her after her court date. And I haven't seen her since August, talked to her last middle of September, but he just talked to her last night, Saturday night. My ex-husband.
Your ex-husband talked to her
Saturday
night. Okay.
She got a ride over to the Lillian address.
Yeah, the Lillian address is vacant.
Right now.
And the officers had it boarded up. So.
They had it boarded up today?
Yeah. It's supposed to be getting boarded up if it was not yesterday, today.
Well, that's where she supposedly was shot at.
We didn't see anything that told them that no blood, no nothing. So, I think, to be honest with you, I think somebody's playing a prank on you. Somebody, whether they're upset at you or what, I don't know, but somebody might be playing a prank on you. 99% of them are pranks, because I've got a number of these calls.
I can't find her.
Because I had a over on Lansing, I had somebody call the parents and say their son, and they even mentioned it by name, was shot and killed the day before. So then they called and talked to their son, and their son didn't answer. They freaked out, and the son was asleep. And they had called us, and actually the son was fine. So, like 99% of the ones I go on, they're just people picking on
That
him.
would be fantastic.
Well, how tall is Samantha?
About 5'5", 150 maybe.
Color hair?
blonde.
Color eyes?
But
What was she wearing when you last saw her?
the last time I saw
Yes.
her, wore jeans and a t-shirt.
What, she have a doctor?
She hasn't been to the doctor.
Dentist? Same thing,
Yeah,
right?
she hasn't been. She has braces. Tattooed.
Tattoos of
She's got this on her left arm, her right arm.
butterfly on the right arm?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's
Yeah,
got
that'll be,
the word believe on her left arm.
the butterfly on the right arm will be plenty.
At first, the story sounded almost impossible to believe. Police had already checked that address after receiving a similar tip, and found nothing that immediately suggested a violent crime had taken place. But Joni couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. And during her conversations with investigators, one name kept coming up.
Smash shot her.
Okay, sure.
Danny Hamby.
Who?
Danny Hamby.
Danny Hamby?
Hamby.
The more detectives looked into that name, the more they realized they might have missed something important. So they decided to start over. This time, they began with someone who had actually been inside the house that night. To understand what happened, police started with John Marshall. And from the beginning, they treated everything he said with caution. Marshall wasn't a detective. He wasn't a forensic expert. He was simply another person connected to the people who had been inside Lillian Street that night. His story would only matter if investigators could verify it. Fortunately for them, they could. Marshall told detectives that Samantha had been trying to get a ride to the house for hours on November 4th. When nobody came to get her, she eventually arranged transportation herself and made her way there later that evening. At first, that might not seem important, but when detectives checked the information, it matched. Samantha's father confirmed that he had paid for an Uber to take her directly to Lillian Street that night. For investigators, that was the first sign they might finally be dealing with a witness whose timeline could be trusted.
Was walking to the Circle K on Copley and Rose to get cigarettes and a soda when I seen her and Yoshi walking to the house on Lillian. And about a half hour after I got back to the house, and half hour, 45 minutes or so, Danny showed up and knocked on the back door. I answered the door.
How do you know Danny?
Just in passing.
Do you know him from the house?
Yeah,
And you know what his last name is?
Andy.
This would be the second time Danny's name would be coming up, and the conspiracy tree is beginning to take shape. Marshall then began describing the people who were inside the house that evening. And almost immediately, detectives started hearing familiar names. He told them that Danny Hamby arrived through the back door later that night. Danny wasn't alone. He was accompanied by his girlfriend, Tony Kinney, along with another man known as William. As the interview continued, the list kept growing.
Was he by himself?
No, he was with Tony,
Okay.
is what I was told her name was. And that one black guy that I've never seen before.
Okay. Do you know what he looks like?
Yeah. I think, what's his name? Marcus, something with him, I want to say. Or,
What's he look like?
William.
Okay, William. All right, what's he look like?
Tall, about 6'2", 6'3", 225, medium build,
Okay.
dark skin.
So they came up to the back door.
Yeah.
All right, and they knocked on the door?
Yeah.
And who let them in?
I-
Okay, so you let them in, and then what happens?
They went upstairs and talked to Jody. Upstairs in Jody's room was Jody, Kim, Kate, Sam, then Danny and Tony, and William stayed downstairs.
By the end of his statement, Marshall had identified 6 different people connected to what happened inside the house. And for the first time, investigators could begin building a picture of who was actually present that night. It doesn't get easier than this. The cops now know who they're looking for. But there was still one question that everybody, including Sam's parents, were desperate to know.
Okay, is Sam alive?
It sounded she was making noises, but in my past experiences, it sounded more like death gargles, your body's shutting down.
Okay.
Honestly.
So she's still kind of breathing at this point?
Yeah, but she got shot in the back of the head by 8 to 10 inches away with a Smith & Wesson MP40.
Okay.
Detectives walked away with 4 critical pieces of information. The make and model of the gun, a Smith & Wesson MP40. Where she was shot, the stairs. Who shot her? Danny Hamby. And her chances of survival from the gunshot? Less than 1%. This ultimately turns the case from a missing persons investigation into a murder investigation. Remember that the first search didn't offer any results, but the detectives realized something else. If Marshall was telling the truth, there should be evidence waiting for them inside that house. Physical evidence. If Marshall was lying, investigators expected the evidence search to fall apart almost immediately. They knew exactly where Samantha was standing when she was shot, and they knew the scene had been deliberately scrubbed before anyone came looking. They weren't searching for obvious blood anymore. They were searching for what survives a cleanup. Because of how hot the scene was, they swept the house first, checking everywhere. The house looked scattered and deserted, making it hard to gather evidence. But this time, they had Marshall's testimony to guide them, and they quickly retraced their steps. Once they found it, the rest of the scene opened up fast. More blood on the walls in the same area. Shell casings near the base of the stairs consistent with the MP40 that Marshall described. And when they looked more carefully at the physical structure of the house itself, they found that a large section of blood-soaked carpet had been torn up and removed. A piece of drywall had been ripped out from the exact spot where Samantha's body hit the wall. All of it had been stacked in the backyard, apparently left behind when whoever was cleaning the scene ran out of time. Danny and Tony were on the run, but sometimes it is difficult to break a habit. A terrified local resident called 911 on the evening of November 5th, reporting that a man and a woman with guns had shown up at his apartment in a panic, apparently confessing to a murder. Officers swarmed the location on East Tallmadge Avenue and found Danny and Tony in the parking lot outside.
Step out of the car! Step out of the car! Man, move over here. Step out of the car. Stay right there. Hands up, please. Hands up, please. What is that? Okay. Put all that stuff down. Put it down.
What? Why are you even...
Put it down.
Why?
Hands on top of your head.
Why are you doing this?
Stay right there. Turn around. Turn around. Can I swipe my foot off? Nope. Stay right there. I'm telling you for now, okay? I'll explain to you what's going on in a second.
What did I do? I didn't do anything.
I said I'll explain what's going on in a second, okay? Do you have any sharp on you?
No.
Any weapons or anything? Don't reach for nothing.
I'm not.
Do you have any weapons on you?
No.
Stop trying to reach. I don't care about anything you got in your pocket besides weapons. Have a seat. All the way back. All the way back. Indian style. Stand up for me. What are you doing with your foot, man?
I got
Blisters?
blisters and fucking, it's called jumbo rock. There's another one right here.
Where at? Don't reach.
The fit pocket. Fit pocket right here.
Okay.
There's a knife right here.
I'll take care of it.
I just want to make sure I got a bag of needles in my pocket.
A bag of needles, you said?
Yes, sir. Diabetic needles.
All them capped?
Yes.
Do you guys live here?
My buddy, his buddy, her buddy, my buddy.
What's your name, brother? What's your name, man?
Danny.
Danny. All right. Put your hands on your back, okay? All together. This is your buddy's house?
Yeah, we got married.
Okay. What are you guys doing here?
Is it me?
Okay. Do me a favor. Did he get the car? Did you spill your beer over yourself when I pulled up?
No. I fucking trying to wipe my freaking feet off without fucking causing any more blisters. Can I hop up on the hood? Crash?
Yeah, that's fine.
Elbow?
Ain't no guns in the car, right?
It's my buddy's car. Good was here.
Is there any guns? No?
He was.
No, man, you leave the car.
Danny was surface-level cooperative.
Trying to slide back. Is that better?
Yeah, because I slid down and my shoulder came out, then my hand cramped, and I was laying there.
So it sounds like our detectives want to talk to you about something, and I have no idea about what. So I'll probably just drive you down there, okay? You don't got nothing else on you, do you?
Nope. Thank you, feet.
No, that is what it is, you know? So give me a couple minutes here. I'll get you down there.
But the moment he sat down in that interrogation room, it became clear he had no intention of saying anything useful. He had 23 years of experience navigating the system, and his entire strategy was to stay silent and wait for a lawyer. The detectives got nothing out of him. Tony was in a very different conversation. Detectives chose not to approach her as a primary suspect, and instead laid everything out plainly. The detectives were armed with Marshall's testimony, which was airtight, and they gave Tony repeated opportunities to take a deal. But she didn't believe them. Maybe she took lessons from Danny. The detectives needed someone from inside that world to give them more, before the trail went cold entirely. Dylan Brown was 19 years old and had been brought into the station on warrants that had nothing to do with Samantha Guthrie. He had no idea what was waiting for him on the other side of that interview room door. He didn't carry himself the way someone hardened by this lifestyle usually does in that setting. Within 5 minutes of sitting down, he was already struggling to hold himself together, and the detective recognized it immediately and made a deliberate choice not to push. When the detective finally told him directly that Samantha was dead and asked him if he could help find out what happened to her, Dylan broke down entirely. And then he started talking. Every detail matched the physical evidence already recovered from the house. But there was one thing Dylan couldn't give them. He hadn't been in the car when they drove away with Samantha's body, so he didn't know where they had taken her. To find those answers, the detective sat down with William Alexander, another witness. William Alexander didn't make detectives work very hard when he sat down. He cooperated, which after days of silence and denials was something the investigation badly needed. He informed the detectives that he didn't really see how Danny and Tony tried to cover up Sam's murder or where they took the body because they asked him to lay down at the back. But he mentioned there were lots of trees which eliminated any urban streets, pushing detectives to search rural areas. A few days later, an officer familiar with the surrounding area thought he knew a stretch of road off Rex Hill Road in New Franklin, a small town about 10 miles south of Akron that matched William's description closely enough to be worth sending a patrol car. When the patrol cars got there, they found her. Samantha Guthrie was lying in the woods exactly where Alexander had described, partially covered with sticks and branches, not buried, just left there. Officers identified her by the butterfly tattoo on her right arm, the same one her mother had described in careful detail on the day she first met with officers. Danny Hamby pleaded guilty to murder, tampering with evidence, and gross abuse of a corpse. He was sentenced to 24 years to life. Tony Kenny pleaded guilty to kidnapping, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse, 16 years. William Alexander pleaded guilty, 10 years. Dylan Brown was 19 years old. He got probation.
Damn. Just like that, huh? That was the Uber killer in the murder house. This one I thought was interesting. I liked it, the rapid fire we was doing the other day. This is five killers that was exposed by Alexa, the little joint in your house. So y'all beware of that Alexa. Alexa's always listening. You know what I mean?
At all. Not a neighbor, not a security camera, but a small device sitting on a table, waiting for someone to say its name. Because in these cases, investigators turned to Alexa, the same smart speaker that people use to play music, set timers, and turn off the lights. But they found something much darker. In one case, Alexa called for help during a violent attack. In another, she captured ordinary commands that helped reconstruct a woman's final moments. And in another, police hoped that she'd heard what no living witness could explain. These are the cases where the killer thought no one was listening, but Alexa was. On January 29th of 2017, police officers arrived at a house on 979 Meterboro Road in Farmington, New Hampshire. The call had come from a homeowner, a man named Dean Smarrock, who'd been in Florida since January 27th. But while he was away, something started to feel wrong. He kept trying to reach his girlfriend, 48-year-old Christine Sullivan, but she wasn't answering his calls. She wasn't responding to texts, and the longer the silence went on, the more worried he became. So Dean cut his trip short and returned to New Hampshire. When he pulled up to the house, Christine's car was still parked outside, but when he went in, Christine was nowhere to be found. And almost immediately, Dean could tell something was off. The house didn't look right. There were signs of a struggle. There was something that had happened here. So instead of searching any further, he called the police. When officers arrived, they began moving through the house looking for any sign of Christine, and it didn't take long before they noticed several disturbing details. There were large, dark stains on the living room floor. More stains were then found upstairs in a bedroom, and even stranger, some of the windows had been painted over, as if someone was trying to block anyone from seeing inside. Dean told the police he hadn't done this, and as far as he knew, Christine obviously wouldn't have either. And then the officers made their way to the back of the house, and that's where things took a turn. Beneath the porch, hidden under a layer of debris and wrapped in a tarp, they found the bodies of two women. One of them was Christine Sullivan. The other was a woman named Jenna Pellegrini. Dean had no idea who Jenna was, and suddenly, what had started as a missing person call had become something much darker, because now investigators had to figure out what happened in this house, why there were two women hidden beneath the porch, and who had done this to them. The two women found beneath that porch were 32-year-old Jenna and 48-year-old Christine. Jenna was the only daughter of Amy and Michael Pellegrini, and she'd spent most of her life in New Hampshire. Growing up, she was the only girl in the family, which made her especially cherished by the people who loved her. She was bright, social, and active. In high school, she loved sailing and softball, and by all accounts, she had the kind of personality that made people remember her. For a while, life seemed to be moving in the right direction. She eventually entered a relationship and became the mother of two children. But as she got older, things began to change. Jenna fell in with the wrong crowd, and over time, addiction started to take hold more and more. She lost her job, she then lost her home, and eventually her children went to live with their grandparents. Her family tried to help her. They encouraged her to get treatment, and they stayed in contact with her, but addiction is rarely simple, and Jenna's life became increasingly unstable. She moved from place to place, staying with friends, sleeping on couches, and trying to get by however she could. And even then, her father was still in touch with her all along the way. But sometime between January 27th and January 29th, he suddenly couldn't reach her anymore. What he didn't know was that Jenna had recently been staying with a friend, and that friend was Christine Sullivan. Christine was creative. She was warm and deeply drawn to photography. In many of the photos of her that can still be found online, she's holding a camera, smiling naturally, and looking like someone who saw the world through an artistic lens. She also loved flea markets. She loved antiques, and the kinds of forgotten objects most people will just walk past without noticing. Christine seemed to have a gift for seeing beauty in overlooked things, but she had struggles of her own. Like Jenna, she'd battled addiction. At the time of this case, she was in a relationship with Dean Smarrock, the homeowner who'd called the police after returning from Florida. While Dean was away, Christine had allowed Jenna to stay at their house, and that small act of kindness placed both women in the same home at the same time. But now, investigators were standing in that home, trying to understand what had happened to them. The stains on the floors, the signs of a struggle, the windows that were painted over, the bodies hidden beneath the porch. None of it pointed to an accident. This was intentional. The autopsy findings only made the scene more devastating. Both women had suffered severe injuries. Christine appeared to have fought back during the attack, while Jenna seemed to have been attacked as she was lying in bed. Whoever had done this had not only taken their lives, but had done so with horrifying violence. So police began processing the house piece by piece. They swabbed the rooms for evidence. They collected electronics from inside the home, including an Amazon Alexa device from inside the kitchen. And while most people think of Alexa as a tiny little box that's just going to help you with recipes or petty disagreements with your spouse, well, police, they never guessed that Alexa was about to help them solve a murder investigation. When the news reached Jenna and Christine's families, they were devastated. For days, both women had been unreachable, and their families had been living in that awful space between fear and hope. But now, hope was gone. Jenna and Christine had not simply disappeared, they lost their lives. As investigators began digging deeply into their lives, one of the first places they looked was Christine's phone. And that's how they immediately raised some questions about Dean Smarrock. The text messages between Dean and Christine, they were ugly. Their relationship had been rocky and volatile, and had recently ended badly. In the days leading up to the murders, the messages suggested Christine wanted out of the relationship, while threats and tension were building around her. And that was not the only reason that Dean drew attention. Both Dean and Christine had criminal histories, and in 2016, they'd been arrested in South Carolina in connection with an illegal drug operation. So from the outside, Dean looked like the obvious person to examine first. He owned the house, he had a troubled relationship with Christine, and he was the one who reported her missing. But there was a problem. According to the autopsy findings, Jenna and Christine were believed to have passed away sometime in the early morning hours of January 28th. That timeline was not perfectly exact because the weather and the temperature made it difficult to determine the precise time of death. More broadly, investigators believe the murders most likely happened sometime between January 27th and January 29th. But during that window, Dean was in Florida. Now, that didn't necessarily clear up the mystery. It was still possible that, at least in theory, Dean could have arranged for someone else to attack Christine, and that Jenna may have simply been caught in the middle. But if that was the case, investigators needed to know who had gone into that house while Dean was away. So now they turned to surveillance footage. And there he was. On the evening before the murders, Jenna and Christine were inside the home, and at some point, they were joined by a man wearing a white hat and a flannel shirt over a t-shirt. And he was not Dean, but he was clearly there with them. And then, as the suspected time of the murders drew closer, the cameras suddenly shut off. Someone had disabled the surveillance system, and investigators believed the man in white may have been responsible. And more importantly, he appeared to be the last known person to be seen with Jenna and Christine before they lost their lives. Now, when police showed this footage to Dean, he recognized the man right away. His name was Timothy Verrill. Timothy was 34 years old, and he was a close friend of Dean's, and he was also connected to Dean through the same illegal drug activity. But at first, investigators still had a major question. Even if Timothy had been at the house, why would he kill Christine and Jenna? To get answers, police brought him in for an interview. Timothy admitted he had been at the house, but he denied shutting off the surveillance cameras. He also denied having anything to do with the murders. And according to him, the visit was casual. He claimed the three of them just listened to music on an Alexa device in the kitchen, they smoked for a bit, they talked for a while, and then he left. But the evidence inside that house told a different story. Investigators found Timothy's fingerprints on spray paint cans, and those cans were believed to have been the ones used to paint over the windows, blocking the view to inside of the home. His fingerprints were also found on trash bags that were discarded inside the house, and those bags contained significant amounts of evidence that linked to the victims. And then there was the cleaning supplies. Cleaning products were found both inside the house and in Timothy's car, suggesting someone had tried to clean up after the attacks. And the most significant piece of evidence may have been the white hat that Timothy was wearing in the surveillance footage. Christina's DNA was found on it. At that point, Timothy's explanation started to fall apart. He placed himself inside the home. The surveillance footage also placed him there. And the Alexa transcripts confirmed he had been with the women. And while the device did not capture the murders or any obvious confection, it still heard more than enough to confirm that Timothy was there, and the story he told the police was not entirely true. The thing is, these devices are always listening, even when they seem like they're not. So taken together, the evidence was enough. In February of 2017, Timothy Verrill was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Jenna Pellegrini and Christine Sullivan. But even then, one major question remained. Why? Timothy knew Christine through Dean. He was part of the same circle. But Jenna's role in all of this was much harder to understand. Had she simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time? Was Christine always the target? Or had Timothy gone into that house intending to take the lives of both of those women? And if he did, what was the motive? Because investigators had evidence pointing to Timothy Verrill. The reason behind that attack was still not clear. As prosecutors prepared for trial, one of their biggest questions was motive. They had the evidence, they had the surveillance footage, they had forensic findings, but they still needed to explain why Timothy Verrill would walk into that house and attack 2 women with such violence. The brutality of the scene suggested rage. It looked personal. And the fact that Timothy appeared to have tried to clean up afterward only made the case feel darker and more calculated. But the reason behind it was still difficult to pin down. Several people who knew both Timothy and Dean later testified that Timothy had been heavily abusing illegal substances in the days leading up to the murders. They described him as paranoid, detached from reality, and increasingly unstable. That helped explain his state of mind, but it still did not fully explain why Jenna and Christine were killed. According to the state, Timothy may not have known Jenna at all. Their theory was that he'd arrived at the house and saw an unfamiliar woman there, and his paranoia took over. Prosecutors believed Timothy may have convinced himself that Jenna was a police informant, and because the people in that circle were involved in illegal drug activity, the presence of someone he did not recognize may have sent him spiraling. In that theory, Jenna became his first target. Christine, prosecutors argued, may have been killed because she witnessed the attack. If Timothy had attacked Jenna in that house, Christine could identify him. She could go to the police, she could tell Dean, she could expose everything. So, according to the prosecution, Timothy silenced them both. Now, whether Timothy was completely coherent for all of this or whether he was so far gone in a spiral of addiction, we'll never know. The thing a lot of people who haven't dealt with addiction struggle to understand is that when you're in that state of mind, all natural logic is out the window. It's not that you're spaced out and hazy, it's that ordinary logic has been replaced with new logic that in that moment feels irrefutable. So truth be told, there's no way any of us could ever figure out what Timothy was thinking at that moment, or why he did what he did. But the fact of the matter is, if Timothy was intoxicated, he allowed himself to take those substances that fed that addiction, and thus allowed himself to be consumed by paranoia enough to take 2 innocent women's lives. When the trial began, the state laid out its version of the timeline. On January 27th, before the murders, surveillance footage showed Jenna and Christine moving around the house doing ordinary things. They were alive and nothing seemed immediately alarming. And then Timothy arrived. Prosecutors argued that once he was inside the home, he began taking steps to make sure no one could see what was happening. The windows were spray painted with green paint, blocking the view from the outside. The surveillance cameras were tampered with, and to the state, those details suggested the attack was not random. They believed Timothy was preparing the house before the violence began. Then, at around 7:57 a.m., the cameras again captured Timothy. But by that point, Jenna and Christine were no longer in the picture. In the footage, Timothy appeared to be wearing the same clothing that he wore earlier, but something was different. His shoes were in his hands, and he was walking around barefoot. Prosecutors believed this was after the murders, after the women's bodies had been moved to the back porch, and after Timothy had begun trying to clean up the scene. The state argued that the attacks were violent, chaotic, and deeply messy. But afterward, Timothy tried to cover his tracks. He painted the windows, he shut off the cameras, he handled the trash bags, and then the cleaning supplies were found. And physical evidence then connected him to the attempted cleanup. But Timothy maintained his innocence. His defense attorneys argued that police had focused on the wrong man. Their claim was that Dean, Christine's ex-boyfriend, and the owner of the home, had far more reason to want her out of the picture. The defense pointed to the text messages between Dean and Christine, which showed a volatile and deteriorating relationship. They argued that Dean had threatened Christine and that he had a motive to want to hurt her. In their version of the case, Christine was the real target, and Jenna was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the defense had a major problem. If you remember, Dean was in Florida when the murders occurred. His phone records placed him there, and investigators found no digital trail proving that he had arranged any sort of hit. There were no suspicious messages, no incriminating calls, and no clear evidence that Dean had hired anyone to take out Christine. The defense could argue that Dean had the motive, but they couldn't prove he had the means or the connection to actually make it happen from hundreds of miles away. The thing is, in order for Timothy to be set free, the defense did not have to prove that Dean was guilty. They only had to create reasonable doubt. And by 2019, they did. On October 31st, more than 2 years after Jenna and Christine were killed, Timothy Verrill's first trial ended in a mistrial. For the families, this was devastating. They'd sat through all the evidence, they listened to the details, they'd waited for accountability, and in the end, there was still no final verdict. Justice had been delayed again. A second trial did not begin until March of 2024, 5 years after the first trial ended. This time, prosecutors returned to Stratford County Superior Court with much of the same evidence, but they also brought in a new key witness. His name was Josh. Josh was a friend of Timothy's, and according to prosecutors, he was one of the people Timothy went to after leaving the house. But Josh was not a perfect witness. He was also involved in the illegal drug trade, and he had a criminal record of his own. But the flaw with him being the star witness is that in order for the police to get him there, they had to promise him that some of his charges would be reduced or removed entirely. Now, does that mean that Josh was lying under oath? Absolutely not. But does it mean he may have had an incentive to? Well, the jury needed to be careful. According to Josh, Timothy showed up in the early morning hours after the murders looking disheveled. His flannel shirt was gone. He was wearing only a t-shirt and pants, which appeared to match the pants that he'd been seen wearing in the surveillance footage. He also said Timothy was sweating heavily, drinking beer and acting frantic. Then Timothy asked him for a different pair of pants. Josh gave him a pair, and Timothy changed right in front of him, which was pretty odd. At the time, Josh did not fully understand what he had just seen, but later, after Jenna and Christine were found at Dean's house, that moment took on a darker meaning. But even with Josh's testimony, one answer remained difficult to explain. Why? Was Timothy acting out of drug-fueled paranoia? Did he believe Jenna was an informant? Was the attack connected to the illegal business surrounding Dean and Christine? Or did something happen inside that house that escalated beyond control? The state could not answer every question, but they could show that Timothy was there. They could show that he lied about parts of what happened, and they could show the physical evidence to connect him to the house, the cleanup, the painted windows, and Christine herself. And they could show that after the murders, he appeared to flee, change clothes, and distance himself from the scene. So after the evidence was presented, the case went to the jury for a decision. In April of 2024, Timothy Verrill was found not guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. But he was not acquitted. Instead, the jury found him guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder and for falsifying evidence. At the sentencing, the judge handed down the maximum sentence available for both of those charges, 90 years to life in prison. For the families of Jenna and Christine, the verdict was bittersweet. It had taken years. There had been 2 trials, a mistrial, delays, uncertainty, and the pain of having to relive the worst details over and over again. But finally, there was accountability. And strangely enough, one of the pieces that helped place Timothy inside that house was a smart home device sitting in the kitchen, an Amazon Echo, Alexa. But it didn't record the murders, and it didn't capture confession, but it did help confirm that Timothy had been there with Jenna and Christine before everything went silent. Summer gets busy fast. You're running around, traveling, working, trying to actually enjoy your life a little bit, and you keep telling yourself, I'm going to eat better this week. I'm going to have real food ready when I get home. And then you open up the fridge and see the same sad vegetables you bought with good intentions slowly turning into a science experiment. Well, that's why I love Factor so much, and why they offered to sponsor this portion of today's video. Factor delivers chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals straight to your door, so you can eat well this summer without spending all of your time in the kitchen. What I like about Factor is that it takes the part I'm worst at, planning, prepping, and cleaning up, and it removes it from the equation. The meals are ready to eat, and they're made with real ingredients, balanced macros, and it least 2 vegetables per meal, so they're built to help you hit your summer nutrition goals. For me, this is just one of those things that makes life easier. When I'm working on a long video, filming, editing, or just trying to get through a packed day, I don't always want to stop everything and figure out what I'm going to eat. And the meals are fresh and never frozen, which is a big part of why they feel so convenient without feeling like you're settling. I've ordered meals from Factor multiple times now, especially during busy weeks when I don't want to think about meal planning. I absolutely love their meals, and I genuinely think you will too. Head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code TIEKNOTSFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a full year. That's TIEKNOTSFB50 at Factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. TIEKNOTSFB50 at Factor75.com. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Thanks again to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Victor Collins was 47 years old when his life came to a sudden and suspicious end. He'd been born in Georgia in March of 1968, but by 2015 he was living in Centerton, Arkansas with his wife Christine and their 5 children. Victor and Christine had been married for 18 years, and by all accounts, Victor was the kind of man that many people liked being around. He loved football, he enjoyed spending time with his friends from work, and above everything else, he loved his family. Before moving to Arkansas, Victor had spent part of his life in law enforcement. He worked for the Kenton Police Department, and later with the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office. But eventually, he stepped away from police work. He moved his family to Arkansas, and he took a job in loss prevention at a local Walmart. It was a quieter job, a safer job, the kind of life that seemed far removed from the danger that he may have once faced as an officer. But in November of 2015, everything changed. Victor had gone out to spend time with friends, something he'd done many times before. There's nothing about that day that should have ended in tragedy, but by the next morning, he'd be found deceased under deeply suspicious circumstances. And one of the strangest clues in the entire case would not come from a witness. It would come from something sitting inside the home. It was a Saturday, and for Victor, the plan was simple. He was going to spend the evening with friends, watch football, have a few drinks, and relax. Nothing about it seemed unusual. In fact, this was exactly the kind of weekend that Victor enjoyed. That night, he was at home with one of his friends, James Bates, in Bentonville, Arkansas. There were also 2 other friends, Owen McDonald and Sean Henry. The group had gathered to watch the Mississippi State football team take on the Arkansas Razorbacks, a game that would have had plenty of attention in Arkansas. According to court documents, the men were drinking throughout the evening as they watched the game and spent time together. For hours, everything seemed normal. After the game ended, the night continued. The group decided to then get into James's hot tub, and according to the timeline, they spent the late evening talking, drinking, and soaking outside. But then, one by one, the night began to wind down. Owen and Sean were the first to leave, and when they did, they both remembered Victor still sitting in the hot tub. He was alive, he seemed normal. There was nothing about the scene that made either of them believe that something was wrong. James, meanwhile, had been moving in and out of the house throughout the night. He would leave the hot tub, he'd go inside, he'd get another drink, and then come back out. I mean, since this was his house and he was hosting, that didn't really seem unusual. But after Owen and Sean left, only James and Victor remained. According to James, he eventually went to bed around 1 a.m., leaving Victor alone in the hot tub. Now, why Victor stayed behind is not clear. Maybe he wanted to relax a little longer. Maybe he didn't realize how much time had passed. Or maybe something happened after everyone else was gone. The next morning, James woke up a little after 9 a.m. When he came out of his bedroom, he didn't see Victor inside the house, so he went outside to check on him. And that's when he found him. Victor Collins was lying face down in the hot tub, unresponsive, and James called 911, and the police and paramedics arrived at the home by about 9:30 a.m. But almost immediately, the scene raised questions. Victor had injuries to his face that appeared to be consistent with some kind of struggle. His wedding ring was found at the bottom of the hot tub, along with his broken eyeglasses. This did not look like some simple accident. So investigators began speaking with the person who had called them there, James Bates. James told the police that he went to bed at about 1 a.m. and had slept completely through the night. He said he didn't wake up until a little after 9, and that's when he realized that Victor wasn't inside, that he found him in the tub. Police then looked for signs that someone else may have entered the home. If this had been a robbery or an attack by an outsider, there should have been some indication of that. But there were no obvious signs of forced entry, nothing that appeared to be missing. Valuables were all still inside the home. There was no immediate evidence that anyone besides James and Victor had been there after the other men left. So investigators began processing the scene. They brought in forensic experts and they searched the home and they looked around the hot tub. They tried to find anything that could explain how a night of football and drinks had ended with Victor Collins dead in the water. Before long, they found several details that made the case even more suspicious. The first details investigators noticed was a hot tub cushion lying on the patio some distance away from Victor's body. That alone may not have meant much, but when it was tested, Victor's DNA was found on it. And then there was the patio itself. Investigators believe the area around the hot tub appeared to have been washed down, as if someone had hosed off the patio in the hot tub before police arrived. And that immediately raised a disturbing question. Why would anyone clean the area before calling 911? At first, there was still a chance that Victor's death had been some tragic accident. He'd been drinking, he'd been alone in the hot tub, his blood alcohol level was reportedly around 3 times the legal limit to drive, so it was not impossible to imagine he could have slipped, hit his head, and fallen into the water and drowned. But the autopsy made that explanation much harder to accept. The medical examiner concluded that Victor had passed away from strangulation, with drowning as a secondary factor. In other words, this no longer looked like some drunk accident in a hot tub, it looked like a murder. James Bates continued to deny any involvement. And yes, Victor had passed away outside his house, and yes, James was apparently the only other person there after the others left, but James insisted he'd gone to bed and had no idea what happened to his friend. So investigators looked closely at the other 2 men who'd been there that night, Owen McDonald and Sean Henry. Both men said Victor was alive and didn't appear to be in any distress when they left. Their alibis were checked. Owen, who was heavily intoxicated, was seen walking around the home after leaving James's house, and a neighbor eventually gave him a ride back to his own house. His wife later confirmed he was home after midnight, asleep and hungover. To investigators, that narrowed down the timeline. Whatever happened to Victor seemed to have happened after Owen and Sean left, which meant, according to the timeline, only 2 men were still at the house, Victor Collins and James Bates. Police continued gathering any evidence that might explain what happened, and they collected James's electronics, including his phone, MacBook, iPads, tablets, a PlayStation 4, and other devices. And then, they also seized an Amazon Echo from inside the home. This device stood out for a specific reason. Neighbors had reportedly heard music playing from the house that night, and investigators believed it may have come from the Echo. If that device had captured anything from the time Victor passed away, even a voice command or a timestamp, it could help establish what happened inside the home. The problem was that this was James's house. Victor and the others had all been there willingly. Their DNA and fingerprints could all be explained away. But investigators needed more than just the normal traces people leave behind during a night of drinking with friends. So the police brought James in for questioning, and that's when they noticed something. He had injuries on his hands and his arms, and he also had bruising on his chest and abdomen. On their own, these injuries could be explained. The men had been drinking. They'd been in and out of a hot tub. Maybe someone slipped, maybe someone stumbled. But given everything else, the injuries to Victor, the broken glasses, the wedding ring at the bottom of the tub, and then the apparent cleanup, investigators couldn't ignore what they were seeing. They looked at James's phone records, and once again, the story began to shift. James had told the police that he went to bed at about 1 a.m., and he slept through the night. But his call history showed that sometime after 1 a.m., on November 22nd, calls were made from his phone to his father and several other people. The calls didn't appear to fully connect, but they still raised questions. If James had been asleep all night, why was his phone making calls after 1 a.m.? Maybe they were accidental. Maybe they were pocket dials. But if James had been awake, or if he knew his phone had been used, investigators believed he should have told them that from the beginning. Then came one of the strangest pieces of evidence in the case, the water meter. James's home had a smart water meter, which recorded water usage inside the house and the times in which it was used. According to investigators, the meter showed an unusual spike in water use during the early morning hours of November 22nd. Between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., about 50 gallons of water was used. Then later, between 2 and 3, another 90 gallons was used. That was a massive amount of water, especially for that time of night. Investigators compared it to the home's previous usage and found that James had never consumed that much water in a similar period in over 2 years. So now the apparent cleanup made more sense. The patio looked like it had been hosed down because it had been. The hot tub area appeared to have been washed because it had been. And the water meter suggested a large amount of water had been used during the exact window James claimed he was asleep. But if James was not awake, who could have possibly used all this water and why? Still, investigators had a problem. Much of what they learned was just circumstantial. Now, it was suspicious, yes, but it was still explainable. The injuries could have been blamed on a drunken night. The phone calls could have been accidental. The water usage could be explained by something completely unrelated. Even the DNA at the scene was difficult to interpret because Victor had been a guest at James's home. They needed something stronger. And that's when investigators turned back to the Amazon Echo. They wanted to know whether the device had recorded anything during the hours when they believed Victor likely lost his life. A voice, a command, a sound, anything that might show who was awake, what was happening, and whether James's version of events was true. And sure enough, they found something. Sometime after Victor's death, James Bates was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. He pleaded not guilty, and his bail was set at $350,000, which he later posted, allowing him to remain out of jail while he awaited trial. But by that point, the case against him had already taken shape. Investigators did not just have a man found dead in a hot tub, they had injuries. They had signs of a possible cleanup. They had unexplained water usage. They had suspicious phone activity. And sitting inside the house was a smart speaker the police hoped might have heard something James had not told them. Because that was still the central question in the case. What happened? According to James, he went to bed while Victor was still in the hot tub. He slept through the night and only found him the next morning. But investigators believe the evidence suggested something else may have happened during those missing hours. The problem was that there were no other human witnesses. By the time police were trying to piece everything together, one of the only people who could explain what happened had lost his life. The other insisted he knew nothing. So investigators turned to something unusual. Not a person, but a device. Inside James's home was an Amazon Echo, powered by Alexa. These devices respond to what are known as wake words. When someone says a word like Alexa, the device activates, lights up, and begins listening for a command. Most of the time, that command is something ordinary like play music, turn off the lights, or answer a question. But investigators wondered whether the Echo may have activated during the night that Victor passed away. Maybe someone said something that sounded like the wake word. Maybe a command was given. Or maybe the device recorded a few seconds of audio that could help establish at least who was awake, what was happening, or whether James's version of the night was even true. It was a long shot, but at that point, police were looking for anything that could help explain what happened inside that house. So the Bentonville Police Department requested records from Amazon connected to James' Echo device. They wanted subscriber information, transcripts, and any recordings that may have been captured around the time that Victor passed away. Now, Amazon provided some account information, but the company pushed back when it came to the recordings themselves, and that turned this already strange investigation into something much bigger. Amazon argued that private recordings from inside a customer's home couldn't simply be handed over without serious legal scrutiny. The company raised concerns about privacy, customer data, and constitutional protections. Investigators, meanwhile, believed the recordings contained evidence of a possible homicide. So the case became more than a question of what happened to Victor Collins. It became a question of how far police should be allowed to go when the potential witness is a device sitting in someone's living room. Could a smart speaker become part of a murder investigation? Could private recordings be treated like evidence? And if Alexa heard something, who had the right to listen? For months, the legal fight drew national attention. People began asking whether these devices were just convenient household tools or whether they could become silent witnesses in criminal cases. It was one thing to ask a neighbor what they heard. It was another to ask a corporation for recordings from inside someone's house. Then, in 2017, James Bates made a surprising move. He gave Amazon permission to release the Echo records to investigators. According to his attorneys, James had nothing to hide. They believed cooperating would help the case, because if there was nothing incriminating on the device, that would support his claim that he had not killed Victor.
But that's also saying that Amazon Alexa's and shit is listening in your crib.
In the end, the Echo did not give investigators the breakthrough they were hoping for. Police did not find a confession, they didn't find audio of an attack, they didn't find the missing piece that clearly explained what happened in the hot tub that night. So after all the attention, all the legal arguments, and all the speculation about whether Alexa had heard a murder, investigators were still left with the same problem. Suspicion, but not enough proof. In November of 2017, the charges against James were dismissed, and he walked away a free man. For Victor's family, the outcome was devastating. They'd already lost Victor in a way that was confusing and painful, and now after all the questions, they still had no clear answer and no criminal conviction. Victor's widow, Christine, later criticized the way the case unfolded. She believed the state should have moved forward with the evidence they already had, rather than focusing so much on this Amazon Echo. To her, the search for digital evidence had become a distraction, and by the time it failed to produce anything useful, the case had lost momentum. Victor's death now remains unsolved. There were injuries that did not look accidental. There was the hot tub area that appeared to have been washed down. There was unusual water usage in the early morning hours, and then there were unexplained phone calls. There were questions about why Victor was left alone in a hot tub while heavily intoxicated, but none of it was enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt what happened, or who was even responsible. So Christine took another route. Months after the criminal case ended, she filed a wrongful death lawsuit against James Bates. The lawsuit argued that even if Victor's death had not been intentional, James still bore some responsibility. According to the claim, James had provided the alcohol. He allowed the drinking to continue, and then he left Victor alone in the hot tub despite his level of intoxication. And that part of the case is haunting in its own way. Because even if Victor's death was not a murder, there's still the question of how a night with friends ended with a husband and father dead in the water. James denied Christine's claims. He maintained that he'd been wrongfully accused and argued that the police had developed tunnel vision, focusing on him without any evidence. He later filed his own lawsuit against the police department, accusing investigators of trying to frame him and claiming they'd worked with Victor's family to build a false case. But that lawsuit was later dropped in 2020. Then in 2022, James and Christine reached a settlement in the wrongful death lawsuit for an undisclosed amount. But even after the lawsuits ended, the biggest question did not. What happened to Victor Collins? The case remains unsolved more than a decade later, and there are still too many strange details and not enough answers. Investigators suspected foul play, but the evidence never led to a conviction.
Okay. I had to, my daughter got a job, y'all, and she needed a ride. It's late outside. You know you can't be letting your kids take no bus, and she pregnant. I don't really with the Ubers and all of that either. So yeah, I'm about to be a grandpa, y'all. About to be a grandpa, and the funny thing is that the baby is due to come on my mom's birthday who passed, which is crazy. So yeah, I had to put a long story on so I can go out and get my daughter from work. I appreciate that. Yeah. I know y'all didn't know that, but you know, when I do dip, I jump in the comment section to make sure I don't miss nothing, to make sure I can still thank people for dropping jewels and that kind of thing and stay abreast with the conversation. But we still rolling. I appreciate y'all. Yeah, I'm about to be grandpa. I don't feel no sort of kind of way about it. I guess it's just probably, you know, the evolution of life. I knew I was going to be one at some point with 3 girls. It was going to be inevitable, so it happened. And yeah, I'm in the dough for the 9-4 on the grandpa side of the game. Let me see. Next story. The brutal and disturbing murder of Ariana Wolf. Let's go.
She was intoxicated and she was with a younger 20-year-old kid.
What do you look like?
Like kind of flamboyant, dark hair.
White, black, Hispanic?
Oh, white.
You're saying flamboyant. Tell me what you mean.
Like he just had like.
In July 2020, the granddaughter of a Manson family victim was discovered by a friend deceased in her Colorado apartment. Ariana Woke had been brutally stabbed to death, meeting the same violent end as that suffered by her grandmother 5 decades earlier. Neighbors recounted seeing Ariana earlier in the day, and she was not alone. What these witnesses told detectives was not only revealing, but also deeply disturbing. Hi there, I'm Kevin, and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. Today's case takes us to Colorado in 2020, but the details, unfortunately, harken back to a brutal murder that took place in California 5 decades earlier. The details surrounding this case are far less well known, yet some are chillingly similar and equally strange. Let's take a look.
hold on, y'all. You know what? The way that one came in, it's like I don't know if I'ma like that one. Like I don't know if I'ma like that one. That one ain't got enough sauce on it. I got another one that got some rapid fire. Let's try this other one that's rapid fire, because that case though, is it me or that case didn't really sound like it was it right there. Y'all want to hear that one? Because I don't know. Come on now, what y'all like? What y'all, come on. Because I got another case on deck. When he said it's like, yeah, okay, because okay, all right, cool. Let's get this rapid fire, because I need some dopamine, some quick fire dopamine. So this is 10 teen killers who thought they'd get away until dun dun dun.
Number 1, Alyssa Bustamante. She was 15, barely old enough to drive. Her dark hair and braces could have belonged to any Midwestern teenager. Yet, on October 21st, 2009, Alyssa Bustamante led her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Olton, down a wooded path behind their Missouri homes, promising a surprise. Days earlier, she had carved 2 shallow graves with a shovel. When Elizabeth stepped into the trees, she had no idea her friend had packed a knife. Bustamante's attack was swift and sadistic. She strangled the child, slit her throat, and stabbed her multiple times. She hid the body beneath leaves and went to a church dance, as if nothing had happened. In her journal, she scrawled a chilling confession. "I just fucking killed someone. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the oh my god, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable." She later admitted she wanted to know what it felt like to kill. The thrill outweighed empathy. A desperate search for Elizabeth mobilized neighbors and police. Within 2 days, officers discovered the poorly concealed grave. Confronted by investigators, Bustamante led them to the body and confessed. She was charged as an adult with first-degree murder, but in January 2012, she took a plea deal and admitted guilt to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. At her February sentencing, she faced Elizabeth's family. Voice shaking, she told them, "I'm extremely very sorry. If I could give my life to get her back, I would." The apology did little to ease a community's rage. Prosecutor Mark Richardson called her a truly evil individual who strangled and stabbed an innocent child simply for the thrill of it. Judge Patricia Joyce sentenced Bustamante to life in prison with the possibility of parole for the murder, plus a consecutive 30-year term for using a knife. Because she was a minor at the time, she must serve at least 35 years before parole is even possible. She is currently incarcerated at Chillicothe Correctional Center. Her personal struggles, depression, a prior suicide attempt, and a troubled family background did not outweigh the premeditation. She dug graves in advance, invited her little sister to bring Elizabeth, and wrote about the murder as if it were an experiment. Bustamante's case ignited debate over juvenile sentencing and mental health. Some argued she was a deeply disturbed child. Others saw her as a manipulative killer who deserved adult punishment. Missouri later amended its parole laws, but she was denied release in 2024. She will be in her 50s before another hearing. A teenager's morbid curiosity stole a child's future and scarred a family forever. Yet the justice system ensured that thrill-seeking turned into decades behind bars. Number 2, Michael Hernandez. He was only 14, a straight A student at Southwood Middle School in Palmetto Bay, Florida. Yet in his notebooks, he scrawled phrases like, "Will become a serial killer," and drew a hanging man. He studied Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, listened to music glorifying violence, and believed God had chosen him to cleanse the planet. He made lists of victims, including his sister and 2 close friends, and wrote detailed instructions. Be quick, remove all blood, make sure they are dead. He even downloaded bomb recipes and sketched swastikas with white power. Michael Hernandez's diary was not the journal of a typical teenager. It was a blueprint for murder. On February 2nd, 2004, he tried to lure one of his friends into a bathroom stall at school. The boy balked and walked away. The next morning, he told another classmate, 14-year-old Jaime Guff, that he had a surprise to show him. Jaime followed him into the handicapped stall. That was when Hernandez attacked. He pulled a knife from a hidden pocket in his backpack and stabbed his friend more than 40 times, slashing his throat. He stuffed the weapon back into the backpack's secret compartment, cleaned up, and walked to computer class, acting as if nothing had happened. He went to class as if he had just thrown a piece of trash away. Prosecutor Gail Levine later said. Another student discovered Jaime's body. A teacher noticed blood on Hernandez's clothes. Under interrogation, Hernandez confessed. He admitted he had planned to kill 2 friends and then his own sister. He had practiced by stabbing a notebook, wrote reminders to stay calm and to kill anyone else who entered the bathroom. The first target refused to enter the stall, so Hernandez carried out his plan on Jaime. He told detectives he was on a mission and felt as though a higher power wanted him to do it. At his 2008 trial, Hernandez pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but jurors rejected the defense. They heard testimony that he kept a journal of people he wanted to kill and had a fascination with serial killers. He was convicted of first-degree murder and armed robbery and received a mandatory life sentence. Then, in 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled automatic life sentences for juveniles unconstitutional. Hernandez asked for a new hearing. At the 2015 resentencing, friend Andre Martin testified that Hernandez had told him he wanted to become a serial killer and thought it would be cool to kill. Hernandez's father took the stand, but was questioned about his son's obsession and about contraband shanks found in Michael's cell. Jaime Goff's parents wrote a letter forgiving him spiritually, but begging the judge not to free him. Judge John Schlesinger reimposed the life sentence, but, as required by law, allowed Hernandez to seek parole after 25 years. An appeals court later upheld the term, noting that Hernandez still fixated on violent music and imagery and remained committed to his original fantasies. He would be eligible for review in 2029. In the meantime, he studied in prison and worked as a law clerk, but the darkness never left him. On April 14, 2021, at age 31, he died of natural causes in a Florida prison. Michael Hernandez's case exposed a chilling reality. A smart, seemingly normal teenager meticulously planned to become a serial killer. He wrote about mass kidnapping for New World and left behind instructions on how to erase his victim's blood. His fantasy ended with the murder of a friend, the grief of a family, and his own life spent behind bars. The courts wrestled with how to punish a child who commits such an adult crime, balancing accountability with the Supreme Court's mandate to treat juvenile offenders differently. For Jaime Goff's parents, however, the questions were simpler. Their son was buried at 14, and they felt Hernandez never truly showed remorse. In the end, the self-proclaimed future serial killer died never having left prison. A grim reminder that fascination with violence can spiral into real-world horror. Number 3. TJ Lane. On a chilly Monday morning in February 2012, students at Chardon High School in Ohio were huddled around tables in the cafeteria. Among them was a lanky 17-year-old in a blue hoodie and white t-shirt. Thomas TJ Lane didn't attend Chardon. He caught a bus there to an alternative school for teens with academic or behavioral problems. He waited with a group of kids from the Auburn Career Center, some of whom he had known since middle school. As the clock neared 7:30 a.m., Lane drew a .22 caliber Ruger Mk3 handgun he had stolen from his uncle. Without saying a word, he fired 10 rounds at the table. Daniel Parmertor, 16, Demetrius Hewlin, 16, and Russell King Jr., 17, slumped over, mortally wounded. Nick Walsack, 18, was shot multiple times and left paralyzed. Nate Muller and Joy Rickers sustained lesser injuries. Lane dropped the gun, fled the school, and was arrested less than a mile away. The attack appeared motiveless. Investigators learned Lane had once been threatened by King and had started weightlifting to prepare to fight him, but he later told officers he didn't know why he had shot the teens. Friends described him as a very normal teenage boy who kept to himself. Others said he came from a broken home and sometimes seemed sad. A chilling Facebook post from the previous December ended with the words, "Die all of you," though Lane claimed it was just a writing assignment. Authorities found he had minor juvenile offenses on his record, but nothing that predicted a massacre. Lane's demeanor after the shooting was as shocking as the attack itself. In March 2013, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder and related charges. At his sentencing, he entered wearing a blue dress shirt, then calmly unbuttoned it to reveal a white t-shirt scrawled with the word "killer," similar to the shirt he wore during the shooting. When victims' family members addressed the court, Lane smirked and laughed. Given a chance to speak, he looked at the grieving parents and said, "This hand that pulled the trigger that killed your sons now masturbates to the memory. Fuck all of you," while raising his middle finger. Judge David Furry called him extremely dangerous and said the killings were cold and calculated. He sentenced Lane to 3 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole, plus 37 years. Lane continued to show contempt for society. In September 2014, he escaped from Allen Oakwood Correctional Institution with 2 other inmates by using a makeshift ladder to scale a fence. Residents of Chardon panicked, and police stood guard outside the victims' homes. Within 6 hours, Lane was captured less than 100 yards from the prison. Officials transferred him to a supermax facility where he spends 23 hours a day in his cell. There will be no parole hearing. His sentence is as final as the lives he took. The Chardon shooting reignited debates about school safety, the warning signs of teenage violence, and how the justice system should handle young killers. Lane's case is notable not only for the random brutality of the attack, but for his chilling indifference. He offered no explanation, and his only public statements were taunts. The victims' families continue to grieve the loss of promising young lives, while the community remembers a day when a boy who seemed quiet and harmless walked into school and turned it into a crime scene. TJ Lane will spend the rest of his life behind bars, a sobering reminder that sometimes evil wears the face of a teenager. Number 4. Vincent Parker. He was the sort of teenager parents brag about. 16-year-old Vincent Parker played tennis, excelled in art, and maintained honor roll grades at Norview High School in Norfolk, Virginia. He wanted to become a police officer. On December 19, 2013, he left school early and drove home while his father was still at work. It was the week before Christmas, but something sinister was about to happen. As his mother, Carol, stepped out of an upstairs bathroom, Vincent attacked her with pepper spray. He stabbed her in the eye and bludgeoned her head and face with a crowbar and a baseball bat, striking her at least 25 times. Medical examiners later counted 25 distinct smashes and stabs to her neck, face, and head. He used multiple knives, up to 8 according to prosecutors, and only stopped when she stopped breathing. When his father, Wayne, returned home, Vincent struck him with the crowbar and stabbed him repeatedly. Despite his injuries, Wayne managed to call 911 and tell police what happened before dying at the hospital. 5 bloody knives, the bat and the crowbar were recovered at the scene. Initially, Vincent tried to claim self-defense but quickly confessed. He told detectives there had been no argument with his mother. Instead, he said he just remembered getting mad, adding that his anger came from my dad taking away my iPod and stuff. To investigators and reporters, he repeated, "It's all from my dad. All this stuff like my dad taking away my iPod and stuff." His family was stunned. His grandfather called him a smart young man and said he had no idea what caused the violence. Court-ordered psychiatric evaluations determined he was sane and intelligent. In May 2014, Vincent Parker pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder in adult court. He was sentenced to 2 40-year terms, with all but 21 years and 10 months suspended. He will remain in juvenile detention until he turns 21, then be transferred to a state penitentiary. His maternal uncle lunged at him during the sentencing hearing. Deputies had to restrain the grieving relative. After the sentence, Vincent's grandfather said he forgave his grandson, but hoped he would get counseling and ask God to forgive him for what he did. The case baffled psychologists and criminologists. A well-behaved, academically successful teenager murdered his parents over punishments most kids would consider routine. Prosecutors said the killings were premeditated. Vincent left school, armed himself with pepper spray, knives, a bat, and a crowbar, and attacked without provocation. The brutality, 25 blows to his mother's head and multiple stab wounds to his father, suggested simmering rage beneath the honor student exterior. Vincent's statement about losing his iPod hints at a deeper resentment toward discipline and a possible inability to handle anger. The crime left extended family members grappling with grief and forgiveness, and it raised haunting questions about how unchecked anger and entitlement can culminate in unimaginable violence. Number 5. Nehemiah Griego. He was 15 and homeschooled, the son of a former gang member turned pastor in South Valley, New Mexico. Nehemiah Griego had grown up learning to shoot on the family's property. But on the night of January 19, 2013, he took those lessons and turned them on those closest to him. Just after midnight, he crept into his parents' bedroom and shot his sleeping mother, Sarah, with a .22 caliber rifle. He then woke his 9-year-old brother, Zephaniah, showed him their mother's body, and shot him too. His little sisters, Jael, 5, and Angelina, 2, were next. He shot them each in the head as they slept. Then, he waited. When his father, Greg, returned from an overnight shift at a homeless shelter, Nehemiah ambushed him and shot him 4 times. 5 members of the Griego family lay dead. What happened next was even more chilling. Nehemiah reloaded the family's rifles, packed them into the van, and planned to drive to a Walmart on Guns Across America Day to shoot strangers until police killed him. He even thought about killing his 12-year-old girlfriend's parents. Before leaving, he texted his girlfriend a photo of his dead mother. Instead of carrying out the rest of his plan, he spent most of the day with her. That evening, he went to Calvary Church, where his father had been a pastor, and calmly told a security officer that his family was dead. Authorities later said he had been planning the murders for at least a week. He told investigators he was angry at his mother and had been thinking about killing himself and others. Prosecutors described the attack as cold-blooded. He played with his brother after killing their mother and then murdered him, snapping a photo of the bodies. Nehemiah pleaded guilty in 2015 to 2 counts of second-degree murder for his parents and 3 counts of child abuse resulting in death for his siblings. Initially, a children's court judge said he was amenable to treatment, but after public outrage and appeals, a different judge ruled he was not. In 2019, he was sentenced as an adult to 3 concurrent life sentences, plus 2 7-year terms. Under New Mexico law, he must serve at least 30 years before he can even request parole, so he will be in his early 50s before any chance of release. Griego's lawyers argued he suffered trauma and mental illness. He had been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder and, according to defense witnesses, grew up in an abusive and isolating home. But prosecutors emphasized the deliberate nature of the killings. He retrieved guns from a closet, shot each victim in the head, reloaded the weapons, and planned a public massacre. To this day, the crime stuns those who hear it. A teenage boy murdered his parents and 3 young siblings in their sleep, then calmly considered extending the bloodshed to strangers. His case raises painful questions about juvenile justice and mental health. Can a 15-year-old who carries out such a calculated attack ever be rehabilitated? Or, as the court ultimately decided, does protecting society require putting him away for life? Nehemiah Griego now sits in a New Mexico prison, decades away from any hope of freedom. His family's home, once filled with 10 children, was the scene of an unfathomable tragedy. A reminder that sometimes the most shocking violence comes not from strangers, but from within a family. Number 6. Cassandra Bjorga and Johnny Ryder. They were teenagers from suburban Georgia, not Missouri, but their crime shocked the country in 2017. 17-year-old Cassandra Bjorga and her 19-year-old boyfriend Johnny Hero Ryder looked like a normal couple. They joked with friends and posted selfies, but behind the scenes, they were plotting to kill the people who had raised Cassandra, her grandparents Randall and Wendy Bjorg. Late one April night, they broke into the Bjorga home with weapons including a tire iron, hammer, baseball bat, and knives. Johnny struck Randall first, then Cassandra dragged her grandmother into the bedroom and duct taped her. Together, they stabbed and bludgeoned the elderly couple to death. Afterwards, they caulked the doors to keep the smell inside and spent several days smoking marijuana and partying with friends while the bodies decomposed upstairs. Detectives later discovered the murders were part of a broader plan. Bjorga and Ryder discussed killing several other relatives, including Ryder's family and Cassandra's mother. They even attacked Ryder's sister and her boyfriend. She escaped and alerted police, leading to their arrest. In February 2018, the pair pleaded guilty to the murders. Ryder stood before the judge and called his own actions abominable and evil, asking for forgiveness. Cassandra remained silent. Each received 2 life sentences with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The case raises painful questions. What drives seemingly ordinary teens to such brutality? Investigators said the pair were angry with Cassandra's grandparents for trying to impose curfews and discipline. Instead of talking it through, they planned a massacre. They plotted to kill other relatives and partied next to the corpses. The judge hoped the sentences would send a message that such premeditated savagery cannot be excused by youth. Years later, the case remains a chilling reminder that deadly violence can brew in suburban homes and that teenagers, too, can make monstrous choices. Number 7. Aiden Fucci. On a day meant to celebrate mothers, a 14-year-old boy took a girl who might have been a mother someday and left her in the dirt. It was Mother's Day 2021 when Aiden Fucci texted 13-year-old Tristan Bailey from their St. Johns County neighborhood. He suggested sneaking out late at night. What she didn't know was that he had been telling friends he planned to drag someone into the woods and stab them. He bragged he would act innocent, keep killing, and run away. No one warned her. They were caught on a home security camera walking toward a cul-de-sac around 1:45 a.m. on May 9th. 2 hours later, the same camera recorded a lone figure jogging back, holding a pair of shoes. In that short window, Fucci stabbed Tristan 114 times. At least 49 wounds were on her hands, arms, and head, defensive injuries that showed she fought back. Investigators later found the broken tip of his knife embedded in her skull. He left her body in the woods at the end of the street. Then came an even colder twist. While detectives questioned him, Fucci snapped a selfie in the back of a squad car and posted it on Snapchat with the caption, "Hey guys, has anybody seen Tristan lately?" As officers searched his house, they discovered his mother Crystal Smith on surveillance footage, retrieving a pair of blue jeans, scrubbing them in a bathroom sink, and putting them back. Tests later showed blood in the drain and on the jeans. She was arrested for evidence tampering. What followed shocked the community. State Attorney R.J. Larisa revealed that Fucci had told friends he wanted to kill someone to see what it felt like. Because of the brutality, 114 stab wounds, a planned ambush, prosecutors moved his case to adult court. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in February 2023. At his March sentencing, Circuit Judge R. Lee Smith said there was no motive. The killing wasn't about jealousy or rage, but about satisfying Fucci's own urge to experience murder. He noted Tristan suffered a painful and horrifying death at the hands of someone she trusted. In court, Tristan's sister Alexis dropped 114 aqua stones into a glass jar, one for each stab wound. Her mother, Stacy, told the judge, "Please do not for 1 second think that he could be rehabilitated. He is beyond saving." Fucci read a brief apology. "I'm sorry for the Bailey family and my family." He also wrote a letter to the court saying he was sorry for the pain he caused. Judge Smith sentenced him to life in prison, with a review after 25 years due to his age. This tragedy raises haunting questions. A teenager fantasized about murder, told his peers, and still carried out his plan. His own mother tried to erase the evidence. The crime wasn't driven by passion or revenge. It was driven by curiosity. The case shows the importance of taking threats seriously and monitoring what young people say and do. Tristan Bailey's family turned their grief into a call for change, reminding us that silence can be deadly and that any hint of violence should be a warning. Number 8. Nicholas Cruz. On Valentine's Day 2018, students and staff at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, were thinking about candy and cards. What happened next stunned the country. A 19-year-old former student had very different plans. Nicholas Cruz, orphaned and expelled, ordered an Uber and arrived at the campus at 2:19 p.m., carrying a rifle case and a backpack. He blended in with the teenagers milling about before dismissal. Inside his bag was a legally purchased AR-15 rifle and extra magazines. A security monitor noticed him walking purposefully toward Building 12, but did not call a lockdown. Within minutes, the fire alarm would blare, and the school's hallways would turn into a killing ground. Cruz assembled the rifle in a stairwell and encountered a student, Christopher McKenna. "You'd better get out of here. Something bad's about to happen," he warned. McKenna ran. Cruz stepped into the first-floor hallway and began firing. He killed 3 students within seconds. He then shot through windows of closed classroom doors, killing 6 more students and 2 staff members and wounding 13. The gunshot set off the fire alarm, causing confusion because there had been a drill earlier that day. Cruz moved upstairs, killing 5 students and another staff member on the 3rd floor before his rifle malfunctioned. In all, he fired 139 rounds. Teachers Aaron Feiss and Chris Hickson died trying to protect students. Junior ROTC member Peter Wang held a door open so others could escape and was shot. 14 of the 17 dead were teenagers. 3 were faculty. Another 18 people were wounded. Cruz dropped his rifle, blended into the fleeing crowd, and left the building. He strolled to a fast food restaurant, stopped by a mall to buy a drink, then walked through neighborhoods. Police arrested him an hour later in nearby Coral Springs. In a confession, he told officers he had brought extra magazines in his backpack. He later told a psychologist he chose Valentine's Day because he felt unloved. In the months after the shooting, investigators discovered a trail of missed warnings. The Broward County Sheriff's Office had received at least 45 calls about Cruz or his family since 2008, including tips that he had threatened to shoot up the school and was collecting knives and guns. In September 2017, someone using the screen name Nicholas Cruz commented on YouTube, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." The FBI was alerted, but did not trace the user. 5 weeks before the attack, a caller warned the FBI that Cruz owned guns, wanted to kill people, and might conduct a school shooting. The information was never forwarded to the Miami field office. Cruz had also been investigated for cutting his arms and talking about buying a gun. School officials moved him between 6 campuses in 3 years to manage his behavioral problems and eventually expelled him. Despite these red flags, he legally purchased the AR-15 in February 2017. On social media, he posted violent images and carved swastikas into his ammunition magazines. Cruz pleaded guilty in October 2021 to 17 counts of murder and 17 counts of attempted murder. At his sentencing trial in 2022, prosecutors presented his Google searches, including how to become a school shooter, while defense attorneys argued he suffered from brain damage and fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. The jury unanimously agreed that the aggravating factors were proven but deadlocked on imposing the death penalty, resulting in a recommendation of life without parole. Many families of the victims expressed outrage at the decision. Judge Elizabeth Scherer sentenced Cruz to 34 consecutive life sentences, 1 for each person he killed or wounded. Governor Ron DeSantis later signed a bill allowing death sentences with an 8-4 jury vote, citing this case as justification. In 2024, Cruz settled a civil lawsuit with survivor Anthony Borges, giving Borges rights to his name so he can never profit from the crime, and agreed to donate his brain to science. The Parkland massacre fueled national debates about gun control, mental health, and the responsibility to act on warnings. Teachers were praised for heroism, while law enforcement response and the lack of lockdown procedures were heavily criticized. The fact that a young man known for violent threats could legally buy an AR-15 and walk into a school has spurred legislative changes. Students who survived went on to lead the March for Our Lives movement, demanding stricter gun laws. Yet the pain remains for families who lost children and spouses. The bright smiles of Alyssa Alhadeff, Martin Duke, Meadow Pollock, and the other victims are now memorials. The missed red flags prompt a haunting question. If so many people saw danger coming, why wasn't it stopped? Number 9. Ethan Crumbley. It was almost lunchtime on November 30th, 2021 at Oxford High School in Michigan. Students were changing classes when a 15-year-old sophomore slipped into a bathroom with a backpack. Minutes earlier, he had been in the counselor's office with his parents after a teacher found a chilling drawing on his math worksheet, a gun pointing at the words, "The thoughts won't stop. Help me," and blood everywhere. School officials urged Jennifer and James Crumbley to get counseling for their son within 48 hours. They refused to take him home, did not mention that they had bought him a Sig Sauer 9mm pistol 4 days earlier, and left the school. 12 minutes later, Jennifer texted him, "Don't do it. It was too late." Surveillance footage shows Ethan Crumbley emerging from the bathroom with a handgun and opening fire in the hallway. He fired at students as they fled, then walked methodically down the corridor, shooting into classrooms at those who couldn't escape. Because teachers quickly locked doors and used barricades, he never entered a classroom. Madison Baldwin, 17, Tate Meyer, 16, and Hannah St. Juliana, 14, were killed on the spot. Tate was shot while trying to stop the gunman. A fourth student, Justin Schilling, 17, died the next day. 6 more students and a teacher were wounded. Police received hundreds of 911 calls starting at 12:51 p.m. Within 2 or 3 minutes of officers arriving, a school resource officer and another deputy arrested Crumbley without incident. He still had 7 rounds left and 2 magazines. 32 spent bullet casings were later recovered. The entire attack lasted about 5 minutes. Investigators soon uncovered a disturbing backstory. 4 days before the shooting, Crumbley's father bought the 9mm pistol with his son at a local gun store. His mother called it Ethan's new Christmas present on social media. Crumbley filmed videos the night before describing his plan and wrote in a journal about his desire to shoot up the school. The morning of the attack, a teacher had caught him searching for ammunition on his phone. His mother texted back, "LOL, I'm not mad at you. You have to learn not to get caught." Later, another teacher found the violent drawing with cries for help. Yet after the meeting, the school let him return to class. Prosecutor Karen McDonald later said school officials had legal grounds to search his backpack, but did not. Crumbley's parents left the building without securing their son or the gun. The legal aftermath was unprecedented. Crumbley was charged as an adult with terrorism causing death, 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of assault with intent to murder, and multiple weapons charges. He pleaded guilty to all 24 counts in October 2022. In December 2023, Judge Kwame Rowe sentenced him to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 24 years, noting the extensive planning and deliberate execution of the attack. Before sentencing, Crumbley told the court, "I am a really bad person. I have done terrible things. Any sentence that the victims ask for, I ask that you do impose it on me." Rowe said Crumbley continued to walk through the school, picking and choosing who was going to die, calling his actions an execution and torture. In his ruling, he acknowledged the shooter's youth, but said it did not outweigh the severity of the crimes. As of April 2024, Crumbley has been moved to an adult prison. In 2025, the Michigan Court of Appeals denied his bid to withdraw his guilty plea and upheld the sentence. The case also marked the first time in U.S. history that parents of a mass school shooter were charged for their child's actions. Jennifer and James Crumbley were convicted of involuntary manslaughter for failing to secure the gun and ignoring warning signs, and in April 2024 were each sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. Prosecutors argued that responsible gun ownership could have prevented the tragedy. Meanwhile, lawsuits against the school district allege negligence for allowing a clearly troubled student to remain in class and failing to search his backpack. The Oxford shooting is a tragic example of how a chain of ignored warnings, disturbing texts about ghosts and demons, violent drawings screaming "help me," parents buying a gun for a troubled teen, school officials sending him back to class, can lead to irrevocable loss. 4 teenagers lost their lives and a small town was left traumatized. The case underscores that responding quickly to cries for help and securing firearms could mean the difference between life and death. Number 10. Willard Miller and Jeremy Goodale. They sat in her Spanish class like any other students, notebooks open, pencils ready, appearing to listen as she taught conjugations and vocabulary. But beneath their teenage facades, Willard Miller and Jeremy Goodale harbored a darkness that would soon turn their beloved teacher into a victim. On November 2nd, 2021, these two 16-year-olds would cross a line that would destroy multiple families and shock the quiet community of Fairfield, Iowa forever. Nahima Graber was everything a teacher should be. At 66 years old, the Spanish teacher at Fairfield High School was beloved by students and colleagues alike. She had dedicated her life to education, helping countless teenagers navigate not just the complexities of a foreign language, but the challenges of growing up. She took daily walks in Chautauqua Park to stay healthy and clear her mind, a routine that should have been peaceful and safe. That afternoon, Graber had met with Jeremy Goodale to discuss his poor performance in her Spanish class. She did what any caring educator would do, offering guidance and support to help him improve his grades. What she didn't know was that this act of academic responsibility would sign her death warrant. Miller was failing her class, and the bad grade threatened to affect his overall GPA and prevent him from participating in activities he valued. The plan that Miller and Goodale hatched was as calculated as it was brutal. They would follow their teacher to the park, where she took her daily walks, and murder her in cold blood. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of teenage rage. This was premeditated murder, carefully planned by two students who decided their teacher's life was worth less than a report card. On that November evening, as Graber walked her familiar path through Chautauqua Park, she had no idea she was being stalked. Miller and Goodale had followed her there, carrying a baseball bat and deadly intentions. What happened next would haunt investigators in the community for years to come. The two teenagers approached their teacher and began their savage attack. The brutality of what followed was beyond comprehension. Evidence shows both Miller and Goodale struck the 66-year-old teacher with the baseball bat, beating her to death in the place where she had come to find peace. The attack was so vicious that it left investigators struggling to understand how two teenagers could inflict such violence on someone who had tried to help them. After murdering their teacher, the two boys attempted to hide their crime. Graber's body was found hidden under a tarp, railroad ties, and a wheelbarrow in the park. The crude attempt to conceal the body showed the same lack of maturity and planning that had led them to believe they could get away with murder in the first place. When Graber failed to show up for work the next day, her ex-husband Paul reported her missing. This was completely out of character for the dedicated teacher who never missed school and always kept her commitments. The search began immediately, with the community rallying to find the woman who had given so much to their children. Her body was discovered in Chautauqua Park on November 3, 2021, just one day after the attack. The discovery sent shockwaves through Fairfield, a close-knit community where violent crime was virtually unknown. The idea that someone had murdered their beloved teacher in their safe neighborhood park was almost impossible to process. The investigation quickly focused on Miller and Goodale. Within days, both teenagers were arrested and charged with first-degree murder. They were charged as adults despite being only 16 years old at the time of the crime, reflecting the serious nature of their actions and the premeditated aspect of the murder. As details of the case emerged, the community struggled to understand how two of their own children could commit such a heinous act. These weren't troubled kids from broken homes or known troublemakers. They were students who sat in classrooms every day, who had families and friends, who seemed normal by every outward measure. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Prosecutors said that Miller and Goodale plotted to kill Graber because Miller was failing Spanish class, and the bad grade would prevent him from participating in school activities. A witness told police that items used during the crime were taken to one of the teens' homes, further cementing the case against them. Initially, there was discussion of one teen testifying against the other, as Jeremy Goodale was listed as a potential state witness against Willard Miller. But eventually, both teenagers accepted responsibility for their actions. In April 2023, both pleaded guilty to first-degree murder charges, admitting their role in the brutal killing of their teacher. The sentencing hearings brought the full weight of the tragedy into focus. Miller was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Goodale received life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. At their young ages, these sentences effectively meant they would spend most of their lives behind bars. The courtroom was filled with grief as the impact of their crime became clear. Nohema Graber's family spoke about losing a woman who had dedicated her life to helping others, only to be murdered by the very students she was trying to help. The senseless nature of the killing made their loss even more difficult to bear. Which case shook you the most? Which one do you think still hides unanswered questions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. And if you want more true crime stories that are raw,
It was, oh, wow, sheesh. BNK, thank you, brother. Ah, man, them joints right there. Ooh. I like that rapid fire. Y'all like that rapid fire? I kind of like that rapid fire. I got one that's not necessarily crime, but I feel like it's just as creepy. This one says the most horrifying footage recorded before unaliving. Let's check this out.
People film their lives constantly now. Capturing everything from extreme sports to simple dance routines. But sometimes, these recordings become the last evidence of someone's final moments alive. In this video, we're looking at 6 cases where cameras documented the buildup to fatal accidents. Ordinary people doing everyday things, unaware that death was waiting just beyond the frame. It was June 18th, 2017, on a narrow Forest Service trail outside Seeley Lake, Montana. Dense pine cover muted the afternoon light, keeping the ground cool and damp in places where snowmelt lingered under fallen needles. The packed dirt trail wound through thick undergrowth, its surface broken by exposed roots and shallow ruts carved by spring runoff. Evan Peterson, 31, was riding alone on his mountain bike, following a familiar loop he had completed multiple times that summer. Friends later said he had been spending more time on the trails after a recent breakup that ended a long-term relationship, using long solo rides to fill quiet evenings and weekends. He preferred routes he already knew, believing familiarity reduced risk. His bike and gear were standard for recreational riding. and he carried no emergency beacon or riding partner that afternoon. The trail narrowed as it curved into a section of dense brush where visibility dropped to only a few yards. Wildlife officers would later note that the area sat within active black bear territory, with several recent sightings logged along nearby service roads. Encounters were uncommon, but not unexpected along isolated trails with limited sight lines. As Evan rounded a blind bend, the helmet-mounted camera first became relevant. The footage jolted abruptly as a black bear crossed the trail at close range, partially obscured by branches. The audio captured a sharp, explosive huff, followed by heavy movement through leaves and snapping undergrowth as the animal reacted to the sudden encounter. Evan responded instinctively, accelerating downhill. The camera shook violently as the bike rattled over roots and embedded rocks. His breathing became fast and uneven, filling the audio as the trail narrowed and speed increased. For several seconds, the footage was chaotic. Trees flashing past, handlebars vibrating under strain. Behind him, the sound of crashing foliage continued briefly, close enough to suggest the bear had moved, though it never re-entered the frame. Investigators later concluded the bear likely made a short defensive bluff charge, a common reaction when startled at close range. Black bears in the region were not known to pursue humans for extended distances, and the tracks recovered indicated the animal disengaged quickly. As Evan picked up speed, the trail steepened into a washed-out section. The camera angle dipped sharply as the front tire struck a raised root at the edge of the eroded slope. Control was lost instantly. The footage lurched sideways, then spun as the bike left the trail. The camera detached during the fall and came to rest several feet uphill, still recording. The audio captured the impact of Evan's body striking the slope below, followed by the hollow clatter of the bike tumbling through brush. After that, only the wind moving through the trees remained. When Evan failed to return home that evening, family members contacted authorities. Search and rescue teams located him the following morning, approximately 30 yards downslope from the trail. The coroner determined he died from severe blunt force trauma consistent with a high-speed downhill crash. Wildlife officers found fresh black bear tracks near the encounter point, but no evidence of an attack. The death was ruled accidental, caused by loss of control during flight from a perceived threat. It was August 12th, 2019, on a frontage service road near Interstate 35, outside Waco, Texas. The late afternoon heat had reached 97 degrees, creating shimmering mirages on the asphalt as traffic moved at highway speeds just yards from the roadside. The frontage road lacked pedestrian barriers and was frequently misused for stopping, creating ongoing safety concerns for local authorities. Lila Brooks, 19, and Nia Collins, 20, were community college students working part-time retail jobs to support their education. They had planned to film a brief dance routine inspired by viral roadside choreography trends, popular on social media platforms, hoping to gain followers for their shared account. The location they chose was a service road strip adjacent to the main highway, where passing vehicles maintained speeds of 65 to 70 miles per hour, despite the proximity to pedestrian areas. Multiple drivers honked their horns as the pair set up their phone against a utility sign, propping it at an angle to capture both dancers and the highway backdrop. A pedestrian waiting at a nearby bus stop shouted for them to move farther from the roadway, citing the proximity to high-speed traffic and the lack of protective barriers. The students acknowledged the warnings, but proceeded with their planned recording, believing they had maintained sufficient distance from the travel lanes. The phone was positioned to record the routine as traffic continued past in both directions. The recording shows both participants performing choreographed movements while vehicles passed in the background, creating the dynamic visual effect they sought for their social media content. At 3:42 p.m., as the music continued and they maintained their choreography near the routine's climax, a male emerged from a side street and began shouting incoherently before rushing toward the filming location. Later, toxicology confirmed acute alcohol intoxication with a blood alcohol content of 0.18, more than twice the legal limit. The phone continued recording as the situation escalated abruptly. The footage captured the initial moments of the confrontation as the attackers struck both women, then shoved Lila backward onto the roadway before the phone was knocked over during the struggle, limiting visual documentation of the incident. A rideshare driver stopped at a nearby traffic light, witnessed the assault, and immediately called 911, along with multiple other bystanders who observed the scene from different vantage points. The assault unfolded in seconds before bystanders intervened. Emergency responders arrived within 6 minutes of the initial 911 calls. Lila was pronounced dead at the scene from severe head trauma sustained after striking the roadway. Nia survived after being struck during the assault. suffering facial fractures and a concussion, and was transported to a regional trauma center where she underwent emergency surgery. The phone was displaced early in the struggle, limiting usable visual evidence. The coroner's report documented fatal skull fractures and intracranial hemorrhage caused by impact with a hard surface, consistent with the victim being struck and forced to the ground. The attacker was identified as Marcus Hill, 45, who was arrested at the scene and later charged with manslaughter due to intoxication at the time of the assault. Court records show Hill was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in state prison. The phone video was retained as evidence throughout the investigation and trial. It was never uploaded to any social media platform and remains in police custody as part of the permanent case file. It was February 18, 2018, off the Batangas coast in the Philippines. Morning conditions showed calm surface waters with moderate visibility extending to approximately 65 feet, though local dive operators noted unpredictable currents beyond the main reef structure that could shift without warning. Water temperature was 78 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface, dropping to 72 degrees below the thermocline at 60 feet. Marco Villanueva, 32, was an auto parts salesman and newly certified recreational diver who had completed his open water certification just 3 months prior. He wore a wrist-mounted action camera to document the initial phases of his dives for a small private Facebook group of local diving enthusiasts, sharing footage primarily with family and close friends. His certification included basic training, but limited experience in current-affected waters or deeper diving scenarios. The dive guide briefed the group of 6 divers on staying within the designated reef area, specifically advising against drifting toward deeper water due to unpredictable thermoclines and current patterns that could disorient inexperienced divers. The briefing emphasized buddy system protocols and maximum depth limits of 60 feet for the planned reef exploration. Marco acknowledged the briefing and activated his camera as the group entered the water from the dive boat. The camera recorded the descent and early exploration near the reef structure, showing clear water conditions and abundant marine life. Footage shows Marco following the group initially, maintaining proper buoyancy and depth control as taught in his certification course. At approximately 11:15 a.m., a large sea turtle appeared and began swimming toward deeper water beyond the reef boundary. Marco pursued the turtle, gradually separating from the main group as he followed it toward the thermocline depth. At approximately 11:23 a.m., as he drifted beyond the reef boundary and approached the 65-foot mark, the camera recording abruptly ended, likely due to battery depletion or accidental shutoff during movement. Fellow divers later reported briefly seeing Marco's fins disappear below the thermocline before losing visual contact entirely. Investigators later noted that a downward current beyond the reef, combined with task fixation and inexperienced buoyancy control, likely pulled him deeper than planned. The sudden temperature drop and reduced visibility below the thermocline created disorienting conditions for inexperienced divers. When he failed to rejoin the group at the designated meeting point after 15 minutes, the dive guide initiated immediate search protocols according to established emergency procedures. Surface support was notified via emergency whistle signals, and additional dive teams were deployed within the hour. Search teams located Marco approximately 6 hours later in deeper water beyond the reef structure at a depth of 85 feet. The wrist strap detached after entanglement in reef structure, and his inactive camera was found during the recovery operation. The recovered footage showed normal diving behavior, up to the point where recording ceased, with no indication of distress, equipment malfunction, or unusual circumstances. The coroner's report documented drowning as the primary cause of death, with contributing factors including increased air consumption from exertion and cold exposure below the thermocline, followed by disorientation after separation from the group. Investigators noted that depth-related nitrogen narcosis may have further impaired judgment and awareness, particularly given his inexperience and exposure to colder water below the thermocline. Official findings cited separation from the group, environmental factors, and insufficient experience with current conditions and deeper water diving. The dive footage was provided to Marco's family and was never shared publicly or posted to social media platforms. Following the incident, the dive operator implemented mandatory buddy system protocols and restricted access to areas beyond the main reef for newly certified divers. It was November 8, 2015, at a mid-rise apartment complex in Dayton, Ohio. The building had recently installed closed-circuit television in common areas, following a series of break-ins reported to local police over the previous 3 months. The new security system included cameras in stairwells, lobbies, and parking areas, but not in hallways directly outside apartment units due to privacy concerns and budget constraints. Renee Lawson, 34, was a home health aide and mother of 1 with limited online presence who worked irregular shifts caring for elderly clients throughout the city. Building residents had previously reported domestic disturbances involving Renee and her live-in partner, John White, to management and police on at least 4 occasions, over the past 6 months, with complaints ranging from shouting to sounds of physical altercations. On the evening in question, neighbors observed Renee leaving her apartment hurriedly and descending the main stairwell in apparent distress. The newly installed stairwell camera captured Renee exiting her 4th floor unit at 8:43 p.m. and moving quickly down the stairs toward the building exit. She appeared to be carrying a small bag and moved with urgency, frequently looking back toward the upper floors. The camera angle covered only the public stairwell area, with no view into individual apartment units or the hallway directly outside her door. Footage shows her reaching the 2nd floor landing before the recording captures her being forcibly turned around and directed back toward the upper floors by an unidentified male figure, later identified as her live-in partner. Residents on multiple floors reported hearing shouting and sounds of a physical struggle emanating from the stairwell and upper hallway areas. The disturbance escalated quickly, with sounds of impact against walls and continued verbal altercation. Multiple tenants called 911, reporting a domestic disturbance in progress, with calls beginning at 8:45 p.m. Calls were coded as an active domestic disturbance requiring immediate response. The stairwell camera continued recording ambient hallway sounds, but captured no visual evidence of the altercation, which moved beyond the camera's fixed viewing angle into areas not covered by the security system. Police arrived approximately 8 minutes after the initial 911 calls and discovered Renee deceased inside her apartment unit. Officers forced entry through the locked door after receiving no response to repeated knocking and announcements. The fatal assault had occurred entirely within the apartment, outside the range of the stairwell surveillance system. John White, her 36-year-old live-in partner, was present in the unit at the time of entry and was detained at the scene. Officers noted visible signs of a recent physical altercation. The coroner's report documented severe blunt force trauma to the head and neck, with multiple skull fractures and cervical injuries consistent with repeated impact against hard surfaces. Death was attributed to traumatic brain injury resulting from blunt force assault, with findings indicating intense and repeated violence rather than a single blow. White was later charged with murder in connection with Renee's death and was ultimately convicted, receiving a sentence of 30 years to life in state prison. Renee's child, who was not present in the apartment at the time of the incident, was placed in the care of extended family following the investigation. The surveillance footage corroborated timelines established through witness testimony, prior police reports, and multiple 911 call recordings during the prosecution. The video was never released publicly and remains part of the court record. Following the conviction, building management expanded camera coverage to additional common areas and implemented enhanced security protocols. It was July 21, 2018, at a regional amusement park in eastern Pennsylvania. The afternoon ran under normal summer conditions, with clear skies, light winds, and temperatures reaching 84 degrees. The park was busy but orderly, operating under standard safety procedures. State inspection records showed the park had passed all required mechanical reviews, with no serious ride incidents reported in the previous 5 years. Thomas Eberly, 41, was an HVAC technician and father of 2, attending his extended family's annual summer reunion at the park. While his children stayed with relatives in another section, Thomas chose to ride several of the park's more intense attractions on his own. He wore a chest-mounted action camera, a habit he had picked up on previous outings, mainly to record ride departures and pre-drop moments to show his kids later. He was not filming for an audience. The roller coaster Thomas selected was one of the park's fastest rides, featuring high-speed turns and sustained lateral forces. Before boarding, a ride attendant reminded passengers to secure loose items and confirm restraints were properly fastened. Thomas adjusted his camera mount and pulled the over-the-shoulder restraint down until it clicked into place. The restraint appeared secure, and the secondary seatbelt was not flagged by the operator during the final visual check. The train departed the station shortly after 3:15 p.m. The camera recorded the slow rollout and the climb toward the lift hill. The footage showed nothing unusual. Riders chatting, the steady clatter of the chain lift, and the track rising above the surrounding park. As the train crested the hill and tipped forward into the first drop, the camera's view shifted downward. The image became dominated by Thomas's harness and chest area, suggesting the mount had rotated under vibration and wind pressure. Audio continued briefly, capturing rushing wind and track noise, but no usable visuals remained. Witnesses seated nearby later told investigators that the train completed the first drop normally. During the second major turn, the unsecured restraint allowed Thomas's upper body to rise from the seat, and he was thrown forcefully against the internal structure of the train. Several riders reported hearing a sharp impact sound from his row, followed almost immediately by the activation of the ride's automatic emergency braking system. The train decelerated and came to a controlled stop along the track. Ride operators initiated emergency procedures and began evacuating passengers. Thomas was found slumped in his seat, unresponsive, with visible signs of severe trauma. Emergency responders arrived within minutes and transported him to a regional trauma center. During transport, he remained unconscious, with no signs of recovery. Investigators later determined that the restraint on Thomas's seat had not been fully engaged at dispatch. Although it appeared locked, Mechanical wear in the ratcheting mechanism allowed excessive movement under high G-forces. During the second major turn, the unsecured restraint permitted Thomas to rise partially from his seat, causing a violent impact against the train's internal structure. Sensors detected abnormal movement and triggered the emergency braking system as designed. At the hospital, Thomas was pronounced dead from injuries sustained during the ride. The coroner's report documented fatal blunt force trauma, including severe head and upper body injuries consistent with high energy impact during partial ejection. Death was attributed to traumatic injuries, not braking forces or a medical event. The attraction was closed immediately. Inspection reports cited maintenance failures related to restraint wear and verification procedures. The action camera footage confirmed normal conditions prior to the incident and was retained as evidence. The ride remained closed until corrective maintenance and full state recertification were completed. It was March 14th, 2017, at an abandoned grain facility outside Salina, Kansas. The structure had been vacant for over a decade, with visible deterioration in the upper levels and posted warnings regarding structural instability throughout the property. Recent weather had included heavy rains and freeze-thaw cycles that further compromised the building's already weakened support structures. Eric Nolan, 29, was a freelance videography hobbyist who worked night shifts as a security guard at a local industrial complex. He had arrived at the facility to film brief establishing shots for an urban exploration project he planned to share with online communities dedicated to documenting abandoned structures. His initial plan was to limit recording to exterior and entry footage only, avoiding the more dangerous upper levels that showed obvious signs of structural compromise. However, after entering the building, he decided to move upward to capture interior shots where light filtered through damaged sections of the roof. No trespassing signs were visible at multiple entry points, along with warnings about structural hazards issued by county authorities following a previous incident at the site. Eric acknowledged these warnings, but proceeded to enter the building through a ground-level access point where previous explorers had created an unofficial entrance. He activated his camera upon entering the upper level of the facility, drawn by the dramatic lighting and architectural details visible through damaged sections of the roof. The camera recorded Eric moving through the upper floor and panning across exposed ceiling beams and deteriorated flooring that showed significant water damage and rot. The footage reveals multiple areas where floorboards had already failed, creating gaps that expose the structural framework below. At 4:22 p.m., he briefly repositioned the camera for interior framing, seeking to capture the interplay of natural light and industrial decay that characterized the space. The recording cut off abruptly mid-movement as the camera jolted, ending the footage without capturing what followed. Investigators later determined that moments after the footage ended, the upper floor beneath Eric failed, causing him to fall with the collapsing structure. Other explorers were surveying the exterior only when they reported hearing a heavy crash and feeling vibrations through the structure that shook the ground around the building's foundation. They observed dust venting from upper-level windows and immediately called emergency services, reporting a possible structural collapse with someone potentially trapped inside. The sound was consistent with a significant structural collapse within the building, involving multiple support beams and flooring sections. Emergency responders delayed entry due to ongoing structural instability concerns and the risk of additional collapse. Shoring operations were conducted to stabilize the affected area before rescue teams could safely access the collapse zone. Specialized urban search and rescue equipment was deployed to navigate the debris field safely. Eric was located several hours later beneath debris from the collapsed upper floor, in an area where multiple ceiling joists had failed simultaneously. The coroner's report documented severe blunt force trauma and crushing injuries consistent with structural collapse involving heavy timber and masonry materials. Death was attributed to multiple traumatic injuries, including skull fractures and thoracic compression from falling debris, with injuries indicating death was instantaneous. The camera footage was recovered and provided to Eric's family after the investigation concluded. The recording was never uploaded to any platform or shared within urban exploration communities. Authorities classified the death as accidental, occurring during unauthorized entry into a structurally compromised building. The facility was subsequently demolished due to safety concerns. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.
Ooh, that was a good one, man. I like that one. I think that one was pretty dope, man. I like that. I like that that rapid fire. I like the rapid fires. Hey, so I wanted to get back into the top 10s, you know. Yeah, that was sad. That was really sad. It's a different type of a rush, a different type of feel, you know. they're crimes but accidents, which makes them real messed up because, you know what I'm saying, it's just like some regular degular, you know? Okay, all right. I was just trying something new. Okay. That one was crazy. Okay, all right. Well, let's spice it up with criminals who didn't take their sentences well. The top 10. This ought to be good.
These are shocking cases of dangerous individuals who absolutely refuse to face their convictions quietly. This case takes us to New Albany, Mississippi, where Daniel Stewart Berry was being escorted into the county courthouse by transport staff. He was heavily restrained with metal links securing his wrists. As a veteran officer leaned in to guide him through a primary security doorway, Berry suddenly pivoted his entire upper body weight, delivering a forceful direct headbutt straight to the deputy's face. The sudden impact fractured the officer's nose, sending him backward. Now, additional security personnel swarmed the corridor instantly, wrestling Berry to the concrete floor. His desperate attempt to assert dominance inside the courthouse failed completely, adding major felony, attack charges to his existing legal troubles before he ever stood in front of the judge. Next up is Jaleel Hoskins. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, the family of a beloved local mother sat in a crowded gallery waiting to watch the justice system hold her attacker accountable. Jaleel Hoskins had been definitively convicted of taking her life, an act that had devastated the community. Now, throughout the high-stakes trial, Hoskins had maintained a very eerie, detached demeanor, barely acknowledging the gravity of the proceedings. As the magistrate began delivering a massive life sentence without the possibility of parole, he began shouting across the room, completely interrupting the formal record. When court bailiffs stepped forward to restrain him, Hoskins physically resisted, flailing wildly and trying to reach the defense table to confront the prosecution. The dramatic outburst forced security to physically lift him off his feet and actually carry him out of the room, leaving a grieving family to watch him, dragged away in absolute disgrace. Moving on to Amanda Cook. When 27-year-old Amanda Cook appeared in a Florida courtroom, the public expected to see a defense centered around her mental stability. Cook had been arrested for the tragic ending of her 64-year-old roommate's life, a severe act of domestic violence that basically shocked her quiet neighborhood. The moment the formal indictment was read aloud, Cook unleashed a full psychological meltdown. She dropped to the floor, screaming at the top of her lungs, rolling across the carpet, and tearing at her own clothing. Her attorneys tried desperately to calm her down, but she screamed over their instructions, demanding to be released immediately. The magistrate had to halt the legal proceedings entirely, ordering a medical extraction team to remove her from the room. Her calculated tantrum did nothing to delay her fate. It only proved to the court that she possessed an absolute lack of impulse control. Next up, we have Chance Justin Smith. For some defendants, the sight of a courtroom door represents, a final desperate opportunity for freedom. That was the exact mindset of Chance Justin Smith during a routine appearance for major felony offenses. Smith had been sitting quietly next to his legal counsel, watching the administrative process unfold. The moment the bailiff turned his back to retrieve a formal document from the clerk's desk, Smith moved. He bolted from the defense table using his speed to clear the inner wooden patrician. Now, he burst through the main double doors into the public hallway, sending bystanders scattering. A high-stakes pursuit erupted instantly through the marble corridors of the courthouse. Deputies tackled him just feet away from the building's exterior exit. His brief run for freedom lasted less than 30 seconds, but it secured him a permanent slot in maximum security isolation. Now let's talk about Jeffrey Smearer. In a quiet Michigan community, Jeffrey Smearer was viewed as a regular blue-collar father, but a deep investigation into his household dynamics exposed a pattern of severe lethal domestic attacks that shattered his entire family. When he finally stood before a judge to receive his multi-year prison sentence, Smearer refused to take accountability for his actions, and instead of looking down as his sons delivered their impact statements, Smearer actually stared them down directly, sobbing and shaking his head in absolute defiance. When the judge scolded him for his complete lack of empathy, Smearer began arguing directly with the bench, claiming the entire system was running a conspiracy against him. His refusal to accept responsibility only cemented, the decision, ensuring he received the absolute maximum penalty allowed under that state law. Next up is Darrell Brooks. Perhaps no modern courtroom disruption has attracted more global media attention than the trial of Darrell Brooks in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Brooks was facing dozens of life sentences after driving an SUV directly through a crowded Christmas parade, causing catastrophic harm to dozens of innocent citizens. Brooks chose to represent himself, utilizing bizarre sovereign citizen legal theories to argue that the court had no lawful authority over him. He spent weeks constantly interrupting the judge, building walls out of cardboard legal boxes to hide his face, and intentionally removing his shirt during live proceedings to delay the trial. His behavior became so intensely disruptive that the judge had to repeatedly banish him to an adjacent media room, muting his microphone just so the victims' families could basically speak without being mocked. Moving on to Shannon Huey. With the rise of digital legal proceedings, some criminals assume that a remote video connection means they can escape the immediate physical authority of the court. Shannon Huey proved that theory entirely wrong during a high-stakes sentencing hearing conducted through Zoom. Huey was sitting in a secure holding room at a detention center watching the judge broadcast from the main courthouse. The moment the judge announced a very lengthy, restrictive sentence, Huey snapped. He stood up, grabbed the heavy plastic chair he had been sitting on, and launched it directly into the wall monitors. He began tearing the digital cameras off their mounts, completely trashing the secure communication room, while the judge watched the video feed spin out of control. Huey discovered very quickly that destroying a camera doesn't actually erase the sentence. It only ensures the transport team arrives with extra constraints. Next up is Sean Simpson. Not all courtroom disruptions are fueled by pure aggression. Some are born from the sudden, overwhelming realization that a young life is effectively over. Sean Simpson was a teenager facing major felony charges that carried adult-level consequences. Throughout his preliminary hearings, he had maintained a tough, street-smart posture, smiling at friends in the gallery. But when the jury foreman read aloud the definitive guilty verdicts, the reality of his future hit him like a physical blow. Simpson's knees completely buckled. He collapsed onto the defense table, sobbing hysterically and begging his mother in the gallery to help him. His tough facade completely dissolved into absolute panic as bailiffs had to physically support his weight to guide him into the secure holding cells. It was a stark, tragic illustration of the absolute finality of the justice system. Next up, we have Kevin Litchwick. In a highly publicized case from June 2026, Kevin stood in a crowded courtroom to face final judgment for the tragic ending of his longtime neighbor's life following a prolonged property line dispute. He had spent the entire trial projecting an air of supreme arrogance, insisting his actions were entirely justified. Before the judge officially handed down a life sentence without the possibility of release, his composure shattered. He lashed out and yelled over and over again that he is unwell and cannot stand in trial that day. It was a desperate tantrum attempt to delay the inevitable life sentence. Some people think they can argue their way out of anything. And finally, we end with Carlos Scotland. This case involves an individual whose complete disrespect for the legal process shocked the city of Detroit. Carlos Scotland was on trial for taking the life of a transgender woman inside a local transit motel, a severe act of targeted violence. Throughout the emotional testimonies of the victim's family, Scotland casually leaned back in his chair, intentionally closing his eyes and drifting off to sleep. His complete mocking indifference infuriated the gallery and the bench. When the judge officially sentenced him to 17 to 30 years in a state facility, Scotland woke up, smirking openly at the cameras and muttering insults at the security staff as he was guided out of the room. His quiet defiance showed a complete lack of human remorse, ensuring his journey into the correctional system would be met with the highest level of institutional scrutiny. 10 individuals who believe they could control the narrative of their own judgment. But when the gavel falls, the theater ends, and the cold reality of an iron cell remains the ultimate victor.
Yeah, that was good. I like that. I like that. I got this other one. It says the 10 most evil women behind bars.
This video will cover 10 of the most evil women whose actions will leave you speechless. First is Shonda Vander Ark. To the outside world, she was an accomplished law school graduate. But inside her Michigan home, she ran a high-tech surveillance regime over her 15-year-old disabled son, Timothy. Vander Ark didn't just lock him away. She used motion sensors and cameras to track his every move, forcing him to ingest dangerous amounts of hot sauce and undergo punishing ice baths. She was sentenced to life without parole in 2024, with a judge noting her abuse was calculated to completely control his reality. Next is Louise Turpin, the matriarch behind California's notorious House of Horrors, alongside her husband. Louise systematically brainwashed and imprisoned her 12 of her 13 children for decades.
What?
She enforced total isolation from the outside world, rationing food down to 1 meal a day and restricting showers to once a year.
What?
By weaponizing basic needs, she kept adult children entirely compliant and unable to flee. Today, she is serving 25 years to life at the Central California Women's Facility. In slot number 3, Diane Stott redefines the horrors of psychological brainwashing. Stott operated her Missouri household with a cold, calculated detachment, isolating her family from the outside world. But her true power lay in her terrifying ability to manipulate the minds of those closest to her. Through intense conditioning, she completely brainwashed her own schoolteacher daughter Rachel, turning her into an active, willing accomplice.
What?
Together, they systematically poisoned Stotta's husband and children with antifreeze. Diane is now serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. In Los Angeles, Heather Barron proved how deadly domestic control could become. Convicted of first-degree murder and torture alongside her partner, Barron subjected her children to a horrific system of absolute compliance.
What?
She forced her kids to physically fight each other,
for her amusement and entirely withheld liquids to cause severe dehydration. Through systematic physical and mental breakdown, she kept the entire household in an endless state of fear. In April 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Letitia Stauch represents a terrifying level of narcissistic manipulation. After carrying out the brutal 2020 murder of her 11-year-old stepson Gannon in Colorado, Stauch spun an intricate web of lies, gaslighting investigators and her family. While she was originally handed life without parole, her conviction was officially overturned due to a structural error regarding a biased juror. Though state prosecutors are currently appealing the decision to the Colorado Supreme Court, Stauch remains held securely inside state custody at the Denver Women's Correctional Facility, while a completely new trial looms. Perhaps the original blueprint for this specific type of criminal mind is Teresa Knorr. In the 1980s, Knorr used absolute psychological terror to dominate her 6 children. She didn't just abuse them, she forced her other children to actively participate in and conceal the torture and murder of their siblings under threat of death.
What the hell is wrong with these women doing this to their children? God, I ain't never heard no stories like these.
Through absolute mental imprisonment, she kept her dark secrets safe for nearly a decade until her youngest daughter finally went to the police. Knorr is currently serving 2 consecutive life sentences. In New York, Angela Polina used the environment itself as a weapon of control. She enforced a brutal regime against her 8-year-old stepson, Thomas, forcing him to sleep on a bare concrete floor in an unheated garage during sub-zero winter temperatures. Court evidence showed she routinely mocked his physical distress while ensuring the other children in the home stayed silent out of sheer intimidation. In April 2023, Polina was handed the maximum sentence of 25 years to life in prison. In slot number 8, we find the chilling subject of the best-selling true crime book, If You Tell, Michelle Shelley Knotek. Knotek transformed her Washington farmhouse into a calculated psychological torture camp for submissive family boarders and relatives. She used a sadistic cocktail of emotional degradation, gaslighting, and severe isolation. She completely stripped her victims of their autonomy, forcing her own daughters to help conceal the abuse. While Knotek completed her 22-year sentence and was released in late 2022, her terrifying legacy remains a textbook masterclass in absolute domestic control. In slot number 9, we look at Joanna Dennehy, officially labeled as the most dangerous female prisoner in the British prison system. In 2013, Dennehy went on a brutal, thrill-killing spree, stabbing 3 men to death purely for the excitement of it. But her terrifying pattern of control didn't stop behind bars. Inside a maximum security prison, she was placed into strict segregation after plotting a massive prison break. Her plan involved murdering a guard and cutting off their finger just to bypass biometric security locks. She is currently serving a whole life sentence with 0 chance of parole. Finally, case number 10 is Krista Pike. At just 18 years old, Pike became the youngest woman sent to modern death row after brutally torturing a classmate and keeping a piece of the victim's skull as a souvenir. Like Dennehy, prison walls did nothing to stop her aggression. While already on death row, she attempted to strangle a fellow inmate with a shoestring. Following decades of complex legal battles and failed appeals, the Tennessee Supreme Court officially set Pike's final execution date for September 30th, 2026, keeping her under maximum surveillance.
Ooh, wait. That was great. Hey, that was...
This video will cover 10 of the...
Ooh. Yeah, buddy. I like that. So I'm going to have to follow that up. We got 10 of the youngest serial killers on record. How young? Serial killer mean you done killed a lot of people. Whoa, come on now.
Serial killers on record, 10. 1992. Harvey Robinson was a high school junior with a burglary record since age 9. In less than a year, he S.A. and murdered 3 women. Nurse's aide Joan Burghart, 15-year-old paper carrier Charlotte Schmoyer, and grandmother Jessica Fortney. He was caught on his 19th birthday after a surviving victim helped set a trap. 9. Graham Young, the the teacup poisoner. Obsessed with chemistry, Graham started poisoning his family at just 14 years old. He killed his stepmother Molly with thallium T in 1962.
What?
Because she was cremated, he wasn't charged with murder. He became Broadmoor's youngest inmate at age 14. Released 8 years later, he got a lab job and poisoned 70 co-workers, killing 8. Craig Price. At 13, he broke into his neighbor's house and stabbed 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer 58 times. 2 years later, at 15, he murdered Joan Heaton and her 2 daughters, ages 10 and 8, in the same neighborhood. He later said he was high, but police found trophies. He's still the youngest serial killer in U.S. history. 7. Piedad Martinez del Águila, Spain. Over 1 month, 12-year-old Piedad poisoned her 4 younger brothers with insecticide in their food. Investigators said it was jealousy over attention. She was sent to a reformatory, not prison. 6. Mary Mayer, Ireland. 1906, County Kilkenny. Mary poisoned 3 sisters with arsenic over 3 weeks, then attempted suicide. Newspapers called it the Dunkit poisoning. She was 12. 5. Jesse Pomeroy, the boy fiend, lured younger boys into abandoned buildings and tortured them with knives. He confessed at 12 and went to reform school. Paroled at 14, he murdered 4-year-old Horace Millen and 10-year-old Katie Curran within weeks. Massachusetts commuted his death sentence because of his age. He died in prison at 72. 4. Mary Bell, May to July 1968, Newcastle. Mary strangled 4-year-old Martin Brown in an abandoned house, then 3-year-old Brian Howe, leaving scissors marks on his body. She grew up with severe abuse, and her mother allegedly tried to sell her. Convicted of manslaughter, released at 23 with a new identity. 3.
What?
Cayetano Santos Godino, Argentina, known as El Petiso Orejudo. Buenos Aires police files show his first murder at 9 years, 4 months. By 16, he'd killed 4 children and attempted 7 more. He'd actually tried to kill at age 7. Died in prison after inmates beat him for killing their cat. 2. Carol Cole, 1947, Richmond. 8-year-old Carol drowned his classmate Dwayne Owen in a lake. Ruled an accident for 30 years, until Cole confessed in prison while on death row for killing at least 15 women. He said he was getting even with my mother. Amarjit Sada, India, the youngest documented serial killer ever. At 8, Amarjit beat his 6-year-old cousin, his 8-month-old sister, and 6-month-old neighbor Khushbu to death with rocks. Villagers covered for the first 2. When caught, he smiled and asked for biscuits. Indian law sent him to a children's home. Released at 18 under a new name. Whereabouts unknown.
What?
10 of the youngest serial killers on record.
Hey, these is scary, dog. These is scary, dog. Jeez Louise. Gosh darn it. Sheesh. What the hell is going on with these children? Dang, man. Sheesh. I know I might have nightmares after them. Jeez. All right. Well, I'm gonna swing it all the way back to the women's side of the game. Because if the women in jail, now we're gonna go to the 10 high-profile female inmates in the federal prison system. So, you know, we don't know what kind of crimes it is, but let's see.
This video will cover 10 high-profile female inmates in the federal prison system. Number 10, Afia Siddiqui, dubbed Lady Al-Qaeda by international intelligence agencies. Siddiqui was an American-educated Pakistani cognitive scientist. In 2008, while detained for questioning in Afghanistan, she managed to grab an Army officer's M4 rifle and open fire on U.S. military personnel and FBI agents. She survived the immediate return fire and is currently serving an 86-year sentence under ultra-strict security at FMC Carswell. Number 9, Heather Mack. infamously known across global headlines as the Suitcase Killer. In 2014, Mac shocked the public when she and her boyfriend brutally murdered her wealthy mother during what was supposed to be a luxury vacation in Bali, stuffing her body into a suitcase. After serving initial time in an Indonesian prison, federal authorities arrested her the second she stepped back on U.S. soil. She is now serving a 26-year federal prison sentence for conspiracy to commit murder. Number 8. Shannon Guess Richardson. An actress who held minor background roles on television, Richardson weaponized her home kitchen to manufacture lethal weaponized ricin. In 2013, she mailed poison-laced letters directly to high-ranking political figures, including the President of the United States.
Wow.
In a calculated attempt to frame her estranged husband, she is currently serving an 18-year federal sentence. Number 7. Dalia DiPolito. Her case became an absolute viral television sensation. DiPolito thought she was carefully orchestrating a flawless murder-for-hire plot against her husband. What she didn't know was that the hitman she was negotiating with was an undercover officer, and the reality TV show Cops was filming her every word. The interstate execution plot landed her a 16-year federal sentence. Number 6. Brenda Delgado. Delgado orchestrated a meticulous fatal hit on a prominent Dallas dentist out of jealousy over an ex-boyfriend. After the hired gunman executed the crime, Delgado immediately fled across the border to Mexico, landing her a spot on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Following a high-stakes international extradition, her cross-jurisdictional murder conspiracy placed her under heavy federal monitoring. Number 5. Stella Nickell. In 1986, Nickell became the very first person convicted under strict federal product tampering laws. In a bid to collect a massive life insurance payout, she laced over-the-counter pain medication capsules with lethal cyanide, killing her husband and a completely innocent stranger who bought a tainted bottle. She has spent nearly 40 years behind bars, serving a 90-year sentence. Number 4. Samantha El-Hassani. Also known as Samantha Sally, she traveled overseas to actively support and finance ISIS operations in Syria. Federal prosecutors proved that she smuggled tens of thousands of dollars in cash and melted gold through international customs to supply tactical gear to terrorist cells. Her direct involvement in funding international extremist violence earned her a lengthy high-security stay in federal prison. Number 3. Michelle West. West has spent decades inside the federal system, serving 2 consecutive life sentences, plus 100 years.
Damn.
She was convicted for her leading role in a brutal drug trafficking syndicate, where federal prosecutors proved she directly ordered and orchestrated violent kidnappings and a retaliatory execution-style murder. Number 2. Kristen Gilbert. Operating as a nurse at a Veterans Affairs medical center, Gilbert became one of the most prolific serial killers in federal history.
Damn.
She weaponized her position by intentionally injecting patients with lethal doses of epinephrine to trigger cardiac arrest. Convicted of 4 murders on federal property, she is serving multiple consecutive life sentences without parole. Number 1. Lisa Montgomery. Montgomery's case represents the absolute highest escalation of violent federal crime. Convicted under federal kidnapping statutes after crossing state lines to commit a horrific fatal assault on an expectant mother, her severe crime led directly to a landmark prosecution, held under the tightest restrictions at FMC Carswell's specialized unit. She ultimately became the first female federal inmate executed by the U.S. government in nearly 7 decades.
Damn. Could you imagine what she had did to old girl? Now, you know what, y'all? Man, yeah, these ones is off the hook, fam. I love this. Listen, we're going to keep it rolling. Now, we always talk about the U.S. and how much crime and this, that, and the third is over here. Let's see what's going on outside the U.S. What they got popping outside the U.S. Huh? What they looking like? 10 most dangerous inmates worldwide. Let's do it.
The 10 most dangerous inmates outside of the U.S. We start in the UK with Robert Maudsley, frequently called the real-life Hannibal Lecter. Originally jailed for murder, Maudsley proved too dangerous for the general prison population. He successfully hunted down and killed 3 fellow inmates right under the noses of guards. One victim was barricaded in a cell for hours. The British penal system realized they couldn't contain him normally, so they built a custom, glass-fronted solitary containment unit deep beneath HMP Wakefield. He has spent over 11,000 consecutive days in absolute, crushing isolation.
Is that the definition of putting them under the jail? Wow. Is that the definition of putting them under the jail? Yeah, and it's crazy that they would do that to somebody who does that to PDFs. Yeah, right. That's certainly something, ain't it?
Next, we travel to the brutal freezing depths of Siberia's polar owl colony. Here sits Alexander Pichushkin, the notorious chessboard killer. Convicted of taking at least 48 lives, Pichushkin's thirst for violence never faded. In interviews, he openly expressed regret only because he was stopped from killing more. Because of his unrepentant, highly explosive nature,
48?
He is kept under the tightest Siberian maximum security protocols, completely separated from any human contact to protect the guards. Violence knows no gender. Joanna Dennehy is one of only a microscopic handful of women in British history to receive a whole life order. After a chaotic, multi-victim stabbing spree, she was locked away. But her psychological profile revealed a profound, unquenchable desire for power and blood. Authorities uncovered active, highly sophisticated plots she orchestrated from her cell to murder prison staff and escape. Today, she remains heavily segregated, a constant threat to anyone who dares open her cell door. Gary Vinter, a mountain of a man serving a lifetime behind bars for 2 separate murders. Vinter treats prison like a war zone. He became legendary within the UK system for his sheer physical brutality. In one terrifying incident, he ambushed a high-profile inmate, violently stabbing him in the eye with a makeshift plastic weapon.
Damn.
Years later, he launched another attack, leaving a different prisoner with permanent, severe brain damage. He is a ticking time bomb. Traveling to Germany, we find a mind of absolute, unpredictable depravity. Armin Meufs, convicted for his infamous role as the Rotenburg cannibal, Meufs orchestrated a horrifying premeditated act of murder, dismemberment, and cannibalism. Because of his profound psychological fixation and deep-seated dangerous impulses, he is held under some of Germany's strictest maximum security conditions. Prison staff keep him heavily isolated from the main population, maintaining an ironclad barrier due to the permanent threat his dark psychological profile poses. In Europe, Salah Abdeslam represents a different kind of danger. As the sole surviving attacker of the 2015 Paris terrorist attacks, his threat level is astronomical.
Whoa.
He isn't just physically volatile, he is ideologically explosive. Abdeslam is housed in a custom-built high-tech cell block in France, monitored 24 hours a day by multiple cameras.
What the hell?
He lives in total social death to prevent him from radicalizing or recruiting other inmates. A man tightly sealed away from the world. Returning to Britain, we find James Porky O'Rourke, widely regarded as one of the most volatile and unpredictable men to ever step foot in a UK jail. Originally sentenced for a brutal murder using a concrete block, O'Rourke simply refused to be tamed. Over several decades, he has turned his incarceration into a personal campaign of chaos. He has orchestrated massive prison riots, taken multiple hostages, and launched sudden, vicious ambushes on guards, making him an absolute nightmare for prison administrators. Charles Bronson, born Michael Peterson, has been widely labeled by the media as Britain's most violent prisoner. Bronson didn't kill inside, but his sheer love for structural chaos is legendary. Over a 50-year span, he has spent the vast majority of his time in solitary confinement. Why? Because he has staged dozens of solo rooftop protests, caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in prison damage, attacked countless guards, and taken at least 11 people hostage while behind bars, including a prison governor. For our final historical examples of internal prison warfare, we look at Australia's Mark Chopper Red. Though he has passed away, his prison legacy is unmatched. Chopper didn't just survive high-security wings, he dominated them. He led prison gangs, stabbed rivals with impunity, and famously ordered a fellow inmate to cut off his ears with a razor blade. just so he could secure a mental health transfer out of a dangerous wing. But the number one spot belongs to a man whose record inside prison is truly staggering.
What?
Pedro Rodriguez Filho, known as Pedrinho Matador or Little Peter the Killer. Locked up in Brazil, Pedrinho didn't stop killing. He accelerated. While serving his sentence, he personally executed dozens of rival gang members, drug lords, and rapists inside the prison walls. He famously killed his own cellmate because he didn't like his face. Though his reign of terror inside ended with his release and subsequent death in 2023, his record remains the most violent in modern history. Make sure to check out the
Damn. It's serious in these streets, boy. I tell you what, though, going to jail in the United States don't seem that bad, boy. They will build something for your ass over there. Oh, you acting too tough, they gonna build a joint for you to put you in. They ain't playing. Now, keeping with the, around the world, right? Do y'all think it ain't cracking up in Alaska? Huh? We got Alaska's coldest killers. They cold, baby. Let's see what up in Alaska.
In this video, we are going to cover 10 notorious criminals from Alaska. Robert Hansen, known as the Butcher Baker. To Anchorage residents, he was a quiet local businessman. In reality, Hansen abducted at least 17 women, flew them deep into the Alaskan wilderness in his private plane, and hunted them for sport. Israel Keys, a terrifyingly meticulous serial killer who used Alaska as his home base. Keys buried kill kits across the United States years before using them. In 2012, he broke his own rules by kidnapping 18-year-old Samantha Koenig from an Anchorage coffee stand, leading to his ultimate capture. In 1984, the tiny wilderness hamlet of Manly Hot Springs became a hunting ground for an unemployed drifter named Michael Silka. Over a chaotic 3-hour rampage, Silka murdered 7 residents, including a pregnant woman and her toddler, before dying in a fierce shootout with state troopers. Alaska's remote industrial transit lines also attracted traveling predators. John Joseph Fortenberry was a cross-country serial killer who targeted victims across 5 states. While working a transit job in Alaska, Fortenberry took the life of a local miner employed at the remote Greens Creek silver mine near Juneau. In modern Alaska, technology has exposed horrific crimes. South African immigrant Brian Stephen Smith was convicted for the brutal torture and murder of 2 Alaska Native women. His downfall came when a woman stole his phone's digital memory card, exposing graphic, self-recorded footage of his atrocities to the police. In 2019, teenager Denali Dakota Sky Bramer shocked the state in a horrific catfish murder-for-hire plot. Tricked by an online stranger pretending to be a millionaire offering $9 million for a murder, Bramer executed her own high school friend, filming the crime to claim a bounty that never existed. Thomas Richard Bunday was a U.S. Air Force technical sergeant stationed at Eielson Air Force Base. Between 1979 and 1981, Bunday targeted, assaulted, and murdered multiple young women and an 11-year-old girl in the Fairbanks area. In 1983, environmental extremist Louis D. Hastings executed a radical plot in the isolated town of McCarthy, hoping to sabotage the Trans-Alaska Pipeline and disrupt the state's infrastructure. Hastings murdered 6 of his neighbors before his eco-terrorism plan could be fully carried out. The streets of Anchorage faced a modern nightmare in 2016 when James Dale Ritchie went on a random killing spree. Ritchie murdered at least 5 people in cold blood across local neighborhoods before he was finally stopped during a dramatic, fatal shootout with Anchorage police officers. Violent crime in Alaska is not just a modern phenomenon.
What?
Long before he became globally infamous as the Birdman of Alcatraz, Robert Stroud began his violent legacy in Juneau. In 1909, Stroud shot and killed a bartender who had attacked his acquaintance, setting off a lifetime behind bars.
Damn, Alaska. Alaska's off the meat Rackalopolis. They ain't playing no damn games in Alaska. You'll get done up in Alaska, boy. What's wrong with you? So this one I thought is interesting. You know, if they gonna talk about top 10s, right? Mothers who unalive their newborns. If you made a top 10, it must be wicked. It gots to be wicked if you made a top 10. So let's check it out.
10 mothers who would murder their newborns. In January 1985, hunters in Massachusetts found a naked newborn boy frozen to death in the snow. For nearly 40 years, baby doe had no identity. But in recent years, investigators used genetic genealogy on trash outside a home to find the match. Diane Curry Peck was officially indicted for murder decades after abandoning her baby. Angela Beth Ondudo evaded California police for 16 years. In 2009, she went into labor entirely alone, drowned her newborn daughter in a bathtub, and discarded the body in an apartment dumpster. Detectives finally cracked the cold case using advanced DNA profiling and a single discarded retail receipt, leading to a voluntary manslaughter conviction. In 1997, 18-year-old Melissa Drexler hid her pregnancy from everyone. During her New Jersey high school prom, she slipped away into a bathroom stall, gave birth completely alone, and suffocated the newborn boy. She placed him in a trash bag, returned right back to the dance floor, and later pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter. In 2017, a shockingly similar case gripped Ohio. 18-year-old cheerleader Brooke Schuyler.
Wait a minute. Hold on. I need a little time to digest some of that. He didn't say she was at the jam and pooped out the baby real quick and got back to the stanky leg. Damn. Wait a minute, man. Sheesh. You gotta slow it down some. This rap, it's coming at me too fast. Wait a minute. What the hell? Let me hear that again.
Gave birth completely alone and suffocated the newborn boy. She placed him in a trash bag, returned right back to the dance floor, and later pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter. In 2017, a shockingly similar case gripped Ohio. 18-year-old cheerleader Brooke Schuyler Richardson secretly gave birth on her bathroom floor just days after her senior prom. She buried the remains in her family's backyard. Damn. While she was acquitted of murder charges, she was convicted of gross abuse of a corpse. In 2023, 18-year-old Jakayla Ashanti Williams shocked investigators in Alabama. She admitted to police that she threw her live newborn baby into a commercial dumpster equipped with a trash compactor. When asked why, she told detectives she simply did not want to be a mother. She was charged with capital murder. In South Carolina, Alyssa Dayvault managed to hide multiple pregnancies from her family and boyfriend. On 2 separate occasions, once in 2017 and again in 2018, she gave birth alone at home, sealed the live infants inside plastic trash bags, and threw them into a public dumpster. Forensic pathology proved the infants suffocated. Dayvault was convicted of homicide by child abuse and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Between 1949 and 1968, Marie Noe of Pennsylvania gave birth to 10 children who all died mysteriously. It wasn't until a massive reinvestigation in 1998 that she finally confessed to smothering 8 of her infants.
Not 10 of them? How you get pregnant 10 times? And it ain't lost on me that the black women get capital murder and everybody else is getting basically a slap on the wrist. That is not lost on me as well. But 10? Come on, nah. Lady.
Who all died mysteriously. It wasn't until a massive reinvestigation in 1998 that she finally confessed to smothering 8 of her infants, resulting in 20 years of intensive probation and psychiatric care.
What? Hell no. What?
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
What are you talking about? 20 years of intense probation ain't that got, man, you gonna make me cuss. Are you Scadarius? I know you freaking lying. Straight up. Jeez effing Louise. God.
20 years of intensive probation and psychiatric care. In Oklahoma, Catherine Juanita Green took concealment to a devastating level when her newborn child passed away due to illegal substances in its system.
Dang, you couldn't stop the Meferino? Dang.
Took concealment to a devastating level when her newborn child passed away due to illegal substances in its system. She packed the infant's body into a piece of luggage and threw it into a dumpster. Green was later convicted of desecration of a human corpse in Riverside.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. As we seeing a pattern here? Wait a minute. Are we seeing a pattern? Why do they keep passing out these ain't that Mida? Ain't them clear-cut case? Don't they all sound the same? Ain't they all in the trash can? So you can smother 10 of them and get 20 years probation? But the girl get capital murder? Golly. Man, it ain't that much postpartum in the world, fam. Single, what you talking about? Please, man, please. Get adoption, family members, something. They got the drop box too at the fire station. You put your baby in, no questions asked, and somebody grabbed the baby within 2 minutes. They got the drop box. That is crazy.
California, Melissa Jean Allen Avila was brought to justice nearly 4 decades after her crime. In 1987, a man searching for recyclables made a horrifying discovery. A deceased newborn baby girl abandoned inside a commercial dumpster. The case grew cold for 37 years until a specialized homicide.
So she get away for 35 years. Nobody knew she was pregnant or nothing.
Cold case unit utilized forensic DNA analysis. Investigators tracked Avila to North Carolina, where she was arrested and extradited to face first-degree murder charges. In 2022, 18-year-old Alexis Avila was caught on New Mexico surveillance, throwing her live newborn into a freezing dumpster. Miraculously, the baby survived, and Avila got 16 years.
Well, that's a good one to end on. Shout out to the surviving baby. I hope that they're doing well in life, despite the mom. Well, keeping up with the Joneses, the most notorious inmates in Canada. Y'all don't think it's going down in Canada? Steve, what up? Hi, boo. What's going on? Y'all think it's going down in Canada? Let's see.
In this video, we are going to take a look at 10 more notorious Canadian inmates. Mohamed Shafia shocked the nation by orchestrating what Canadian courts ruled a mass honor killing. Alongside his second wife and son, Shafia drowned his 3 teenage daughters and his first wife by trapping them inside a car and submerging it in a Kingston canal. He remains incarcerated for life. Michael Rafferty remains one of the most hated figures in modern Canadian history. In 2012, he was convicted of the horrific kidnapping, essay, and murder of 8-year-old Tori Stafford. He was handed a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years.
Good.
Ellen Millard was a wealthy aviation heir who seemingly had everything. Instead, he chose a path of cold-blooded thrill killing.
Wow.
Alongside an accomplice,
He got
Millard
everything.
executed a stranger during a truck test drive, murdered his former girlfriend, and killed his own father to secure his multi-million-dollar inheritance. 23-year-old Jeremy Steinke, who heavily identified with vampire subculture,
Little Stanky.
conspired with his 12-year-old girlfriend to wipe out her family.
What?
Steinke brutally stabbed the young girl's parents and her 8-year-old brother to death. Jennifer Pan spun a massive, years-long web of lies to her strict parents regarding her education and career. When the facade began to crack in 2010, she hired hitmen to stage a home invasion. The attack killed her mother and severely wounded her father, who miraculously survived to testify against her. Cody Legabokoff entered Canadian history as one of the country's youngest convicted serial killers. Arrested at just 20 years old, Legabokoff was convicted in 2014 for the brutal first-degree murders of 3 women and a 15-year-old girl, with many of his crimes unfolding near BC's remote Highway of Tears. In 2024, white nationalist Nathaniel Veltman was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder. Veltman deliberately weaponized his truck to run down a Muslim family out for a walk in London, Ontario, killing 4 family members. In a historic ruling, a Canadian judge officially declared the attack an act of terrorism. In 2014, Justin Bourque brought utter terror to the city of Moncton. Armed with semi-automatic rifles and driven by anti-government ideologies, Bourque intentionally targeted law enforcement. He killed 3 RCMP officers and wounded 2 others, paralyzing the region for 30 hours before tactical teams brought him down. In 2003, the city of Toronto was shattered by Michael Breer. He abducted, assaulted, and killed 10-year-old Holly Jones, just blocks from her home. His arrest and subsequent first-degree murder conviction led to intense national scrutiny over child protection laws and the tracking of violent offenders. Finally, David Milgaard represents a completely different kind of notoriety, a historic failure of the system. Milgaard spent 23 agonizing years in maximum security prison for a 1969 murder he did not commit. He was completely exonerated by DNA evidence in 1997, highlighting the tragic reality of wrongful conviction.
Canada.
In this video, we are going to take a look at 10 more
going on in Canada. Damn. It's going down in Canada. Jeez Louise. All right, so we gonna take it to I know it's a lot of, I know a lot of states that some of y'all from, so I'm gonna save them. But we're gonna take it to the middle of the country. Let's see what Missouri. Let's see who on death row in Missouri and what for.
All inmates on Missouri death row. Charles Mathenia, sentenced for the 1983 fatal stabbings of 2 elderly sisters in rural Fredericktown. He is 67 years old, has severe cognitive decline, and is considered permanently exempt from execution due to medical incompetence. Roosevelt Pollard, sentenced for the 1983 killing of a motorist at a highway rest stop. He is 63 years old and is also legally ruled mentally incompetent to be executed. Terrence Anderson, condemned for the 1997 Poplar Bluff murders of his girlfriend's parents. He received a life sentence for the father, but was given a death sentence for killing the mother. Craig Michael Wood, condemned for the high-profile 2014 kidnapping and murder of 10-year-old Haley Owens in Springfield. Richard Darren Emery, sentenced for a 2018 quadruple family homicide in St. Charles. He used a firearm to execute his girlfriend, her mother, and her 2 young children.
Damn,
Joshua Tyler Rocha, condemned for the execution-style July 2022 murder of 22-year-old North Kansas City police officer Daniel Vasquez during a routine traffic stop. Kenneth Lee Simpson. He was sentenced following a jury recommendation for an ambush shooting that killed Herman Police Detective Sergeant Mason Griffith and critically wounded another officer.
Damn, Missouri? Sheesh. Damn, it's going down in Missouri, though. All right, so if we gonna go big, we might as well go all the way big. We going straight to California. Straight to California. The 10 most notorious inmates in straight up California. Let's go.
This video will cover 10 of the most notorious inmates in the California prison system. Scott Peterson, housed at Mule Creek State Prison, convicted of first-degree murder for killing his pregnant wife, Lacey Peterson, and second-degree murder for their unborn son, Connor, on Christmas Eve in 2002. Eric and Lyle Menendez gained global infamy for the 1989 shotgun slaying of their wealthy parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, inside their Beverly Hills mansion. Both are serving 50 years to life, remarkably housed together at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility. Joseph James DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer. A former police officer, DeAngelo evaded capture for decades, until DNA evidence linked him to 13 murders and dozens of SA. Because of severe safety and high-profile management protocols, the state officially catalogs his exact maximum security facility as not disclosable. Marion Suge Knight, the co-founder of Death Row Records, is serving 28 years for voluntary manslaughter after a fatal 2015 hit-and-run in Compton, where he deliberately ran over Terry Carter outside a film set. Housed at Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility, Charles Ng, alongside accomplice Leonard Lake, tortured and murdered at least 11 people at a remote cabin dungeon in the 1980s. Remaining under a sentence of death, Ng was moved to the medical unit at the California Medical Facility. Richard Allen Davis shocked the nation when he kidnapped 12-year-old Polly Klaas from her bedroom at knife point and strangled her. His violent record directly catalyzed California's strict 3 strikes law. Today, he remains heavily guarded at San Quentin Rehabilitation Center. Cary Stayner, the Yosemite Park Killer. In 1999, while working as a motel handyman, Stayner brutally murdered 4 female tourists. He now resides in Pelican Bay's restrictive security housing unit. Randy Kraft, the Scorecard Killer. Convicted of 16 murders of young men between 1972 and 1983, Kraft kept a cryptic coded notebook hinting at over 60 victims. He was moved from San Quentin to the California Institution for Men in Chino. David and Louise Turpin ran an infamous house of horrors, keeping 12 of their 13 children starved, beaten, and chained to beds for years. Both are serving 25 years to life. David is housed at Mule Creek State Prison, while Louise is isolated at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. Finally, Isaro Aguirre. In 2013, Aguirre and his girlfriend tortured and beat 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez to death. Sentenced to die for intentional murder by torture, Aguirre was moved out of San Quentin's traditional housing into a maximum security cell at California State Prison, Sacramento.
Damn, Cali. Damn, Cali. Hey, and it ain't lost on me that Suge did like the least on the list. I don't even know how he made the list. I'm sure there was somebody that they could have put on the list other than Suge, but I'm just saying. Let's go to an unexpected one. I want to see what's popping in West Virginia. Let's see what's up in West Virginia. 10 most notorious inmates. Let's go.
Inmates from West Virginia Department of Corrections. West Virginia's prison system holds some of the state's most notorious convicted killers, including multiple murderers, inmates serving life without parole, and prisoners whose crimes drew national attention.
Right.
Here are 10 of the most notorious inmates in West Virginia. Number 10, Harold Dexter Rue. Harold Dexter Rue was convicted of first-degree murder for the 2021 killing of Ronaldo Gonzalez Media Villa along Interstate 81 in Berkeley County. What made Rue's case even more disturbing was his violent criminal history. Prosecutors said he had previously been convicted of second-degree murder in California, along with other serious crimes. A West Virginia jury recommended no mercy, resulting in a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 9. Shelia Eddy and Rachel Schoaf. Shelia Eddy and Rachel Schoaf became nationally known for the 2012 murder of 16-year-old Skylar Neese. Neese disappeared after leaving her home to meet the two girls, who had once been among her closest friends. Months later, Schoaf admitted her involvement and led investigators to Neese's remains.
All right, Chris.
Schoaf pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a 30-year sentence. Eddy later pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. The case remains one of the most infamous crimes involving teenagers in West Virginia history. Number 8. Joseph Nevera. Joseph Nevera was convicted of first-degree murder in connection with the 2024 death of Kimberly Osborne in Monongalia County. Following his conviction, jurors recommended that Nevera receive no mercy. In August 2026, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 7. Charles Lee Dawson. Charles Lee Dawson was convicted in the 2023 murder of Carrie Michelle Billings in Bluefield. Dawson faced several serious charges connected to the case, including kidnapping. He was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder, and jurors rejected the possibility of mercy. In 2025, Dawson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Number 6. Timothy Kennedy Jr. Timothy Kennedy Jr. was convicted in one of West Virginia's most closely followed recent murder cases. Kennedy was charged in the 2023 killing of West Virginia State Police Sergeant Corey Maynard in Mingo County. He also faced additional charges including attempted murder, robbery, and disarming a police officer. Kennedy was convicted in May 2026 and later sentenced to life without mercy, along with additional consecutive prison terms. Number 5. Gavin Blaine Smith.
Aaron, I see you.
Gavin Blaine Smith was just 16 years old when 4 members of his family were killed inside their Elkview home in December 2020. The victims were Smith's mother, stepfather, and 2 younger brothers. Smith was originally convicted in 2022, but those convictions were later overturned because of an error involving jury instructions. Rather than face another trial, Smith pleaded guilty in June 2026 to 1 count of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder. He received a life sentence plus additional decades in prison. Because Smith was a juvenile at the time of the crimes, he can eventually become eligible for parole consideration. Number 4. Michael York. Michael York was convicted following a triple homicide in Webster County. The 2012 case resulted in York being convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of second-degree murder. He received life without parole for the first-degree murder convictions, along with additional prison sentences. With 3 victims and multiple murder convictions, York remains one of West Virginia's most serious violent offenders. Number 3. Paul D. Thompson. Paul D. Thompson was already serving a life sentence for murder when he committed another killing while incarcerated. In March 2025, Thompson killed another prisoner at Mount Olive Correctional Complex. In February 2026, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Thompson received another life sentence without mercy, ordered to run consecutively to the sentence he was already serving. His case stands out because his violent criminal history continued even after he had been sentenced to life in prison. Number 2. James Roy Belknap. James Roy Belknap was responsible for one of the most shocking multiple murder cases in West Virginia. In 2012, 4 people were killed in Nicholas County, including 2 children. Belknap eventually pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 4 life terms without mercy, meaning he will never be eligible for parole. Number 1. Ronald Turney Williams. At number 1 is Ronald Turney Williams, one of the most infamous prisoners in West Virginia history. Williams was originally sentenced to life for the murder of Beckley Police Sergeant David Lilly. In 1979, he escaped from the former West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville. During the escape, West Virginia State Trooper Philip Kesner was killed. Williams remained on the run and eventually became one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. While a fugitive, he was connected to another murder before authorities finally captured him. Decades later, Ronald Turney Williams remains behind bars and is still one of the most notorious names associated with West Virginia's prison system.
West Virginia, yeah, he looked crazy as cat shit. West Virginia, get it in. Let's bring it up to date. Let's do something a little bit more modern. I did have a super chat goal for an extra hour of streaming. I'm gonna go 3, but if y'all want a little extra, go ahead and sprinkle me. But this one's a great one. 10 killers who did it on YouTube. They streamed it. Ooh.
Just kill. They streamed it. Here are 10 U.S. cases. Dominic Robinson, Warren, Michigan, December 12th, 2025. Facebook Live. Stabbed 29-year-old chef Makari Finley, then streamed the police standoff from inside the home for hours. Anthony Gilia, Jackson, Michigan, November 8th, 2016. Facebook Live. Live streamed. Breaking into a home and shooting a woman on Facebook Live.
Damn.
Brittany Marie Southwell. Killed. Steve Stevens, Cleveland, Ohio, April 16th, 2017. Facebook. Robert Godwin Sr. was shot and killed by Steve William Stevens, who posted the attack on Facebook. Manuel Ruiz, Las Vegas, Nevada, 2024. YouTuber charged with murdering a live streaming couple during their own broadcast. Raja E. Black, Maryland, 2023. Facebook Live. Live streamed his murders of his ex-girlfriend and ex-wife before taking his own life. Nathan James, Chicago area, Illinois, February 2021. Killed 25-year-old Marietta Matthews and her mother, then went live on Facebook, showing the scene for hours. David Katz, Jacksonville, Florida. August 26, 2018. Madden tournament. Shot 12 people, killing 2. The shooting was live streamed by the event's Twitch stream. Heel Kelly, Memphis, Tennessee, September 7th, 2022. Facebook Live. Citywide carjacking spree. Narrated live. 4 killed, 3 wounded across 7 shootings. Connor Sturgeon, Louisville, Kentucky, April 10th, 2023. Bank employee opens fire at work, streams it. 5 dead, 8 wounded before police stop him. Peyton Gendron, Buffalo, New York, May 14th, 2022. Helmet cam Twitch stream inside Tops Supermarket. 10 people killed, 3 injured in a racist attack. They didn't just kill, they streamed it.
Dang. That's crazy. Yeah, that's a couple of them that I remember for real. Straight up. Yeah, like how you gonna go out and do it on Facebook like that? Like that part is crazy. That's talk about the ultimate clout chaser, right? I mean, what else is you doing it for? All right. You know, let's go to somewhere you don't even hardly even think about. What's going on up there in North Dakota? Let's see how North Dakota rocking.
10 most notorious inmates in North Dakota prisons. From murders that shocked small communities to cases that generated headlines across the state, here are 10 of the most notorious inmates currently serving sentences in North Dakota prisons. Number 10. Alex Eggleston. Alex Eggleston was already serving a life sentence for a 2017 murder.
Damn.
When he gained additional notoriety for his conduct behind bars. While incarcerated at the North Dakota State Penitentiary, Eggleston faced additional criminal charges involving assaults on correctional officers. In 2025, he was convicted on new charges and ultimately received another 10-year sentence on top of the life sentence he was already serving. His case is unusual because much of his notoriety has continued to grow after his arrival in prison. Number 9, Matthew Anderson. Matthew Anderson was convicted in connection with the 2022 killing of Wade Goodale in Minot. The case resulted in a murder conviction, and in October 2023, Anderson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Anderson challenged his conviction, but the North Dakota Supreme Court later upheld the verdict. He remains incarcerated under one of the harshest sentences available under North Dakota law. Number 8. DeLon Davis. DeLon Davis was convicted in the murder of Mark Ramon McMillan in Minot.
What you doing up in North
McMillan
Dakota?
disappeared, leading investigators to a case that eventually resulted in Davis being charged with murder and concealing the victim's body. A jury convicted Davis, and in August 2025, he was sentenced to life without parole. Davis appealed his conviction, but in February 2026, the North Dakota Supreme Court rejected the appeal. Number 7. Sergei Carlson. Sergei Isaac. Scott Carlson was just 15 years old when he committed the crime that would send him to adult prison. In 2007, Carlson killed his 16-year-old adoptive sister. Despite his young age, Carlson was prosecuted as an adult. He eventually pleaded guilty to murder and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole. Because Carlson committed the offense as a teenager, his case has also appeared in legal debates surrounding extremely long prison sentences imposed on juvenile offenders. Number 6. Jose Rivera Riefel. Jose Rivera Riefel was convicted following the death of his infant daughter. Prosecutors brought charges including murder and child abuse, and the case ultimately resulted in Rivera Riefel receiving one of North Dakota's most severe punishments. In 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He remains incarcerated within the North Dakota prison system. Number 5. Corbin Alexander Lampert. Corbin Lampert was convicted in the 2023 murder of 16-year-old Taryn Hobein in Bismarck. The killing drew considerable attention because of the victim's age and the circumstances surrounding the investigation. Lampert was eventually convicted of murder. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, meaning he is expected to spend the remainder of his life behind bars. Number 4. Shawnee Krall. Shawnee Krall was convicted in connection with the disappearance and murder of his roommate, Alice Quirolo. Quirolo disappeared in 2020, beginning an investigation that eventually focused on Krall. He was later prosecuted and convicted of murder. In February 2025, Krall received life in prison without parole. Krall appealed his conviction, but in January 2026, the North Dakota Supreme Court upheld the case against him. Number 3. Cynthia Wilder. Cynthia Wilder became one of the most recognizable defendants in a murder case that shocked the Minot area. She was convicted of helping her husband, Richie Wilder Jr., carry out the murder of his former wife, Angela Wilder. Investigators eventually built a case against both Richie and Cynthia. Cynthia was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and other charges. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and remains one of North Dakota's most notorious female inmates. Number 2. Daniel Wacht. Daniel Wacht was convicted of murdering Kurt Johnson near Cooperstown in 2010. Johnson disappeared after spending time with Wacht. Investigators eventually gathered enough evidence to charge Wacht with murder, and prosecutors presented a case that also examined Wacht's alleged interest in gaining status with a white supremacist prison organization. A jury convicted him. Wacht was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and remains incarcerated at the North Dakota State Penitentiary. Number 1. Mo Maurice Gibbs. Perhaps the most notorious inmate currently serving time in North Dakota is former corrections officer Mo Gibbs. In 2006, 22-year-old Valley City State University student Mindy Morgenstern was found murdered inside her apartment. The investigation quickly became one of the most closely followed criminal cases in North Dakota. Suspicion eventually focused on Gibbs, who worked as a corrections officer and lived near Morgenstern. Gibbs was arrested and prosecuted for her murder. After a highly publicized trial, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The murder of Mindy Morgenstern remains one of North Dakota's best-known criminal cases, and Gibbs continues to serve his sentence at the North Dakota State Penitentiary.
I bet. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Let's see what time it is. Okay. We got a little bit more time. Y'all feeling the rapid fire? I like this rapid fire. I like this. I think this, I got one that's real super duper interesting. It says people who got the longest prison sentences. This one ought to be interesting. Let's go.
video will cover the top 10 longest prison sentences in U.S. history. 10. Larry D. Keel, 2,501 years, Oklahoma, 1992.
What?
Sold a small amount of cocaine to an undercover cop. Got stacked sentences. 1,000 years trafficking, 1,000 possession with intent, 250 no tax stamp, 250 maintaining a vehicle, 1 year paraphernalia. Paroled in 2009 after 17 years. 9. Matthew Perry, 3,000 years.
What?
Pennsylvania, 2023. Convicted of SA of a young relative daily for at least 6 years in Greene County. 8. Ronnie Shelton, West Side rapist.
What?
3,195 years. Ohio, 1989. 49 rapes. 230 total charges over 5 years in Cleveland. Parole date had been set for 2094. He died in prison in 2018. 7. James Egan Holmes, 3,318 years plus 12 life sentences.
What?
Colorado, 2015. Aurora theater shooter, 12 killed, 70 injured. The 3,318 covers attempted murder and explosives on top of the life terms. 6. Woodrow and Franklin Ransonette, 5,005 years each. Texas, 1973. Kidnapped Amanda Dealey, daughter-in-law of the Dallas News president, held her 60 hours for $250,000 ransom. Both brothers got identical terms. 5. Rigoberto Vasquez Hernandez, 7,000 years, Texas, 2013. Triple homicide outside a Dallas nightclub, shot 3 people point blank. 4. Dudley Wayne Kaiser, 10,000 years plus 2 life terms. Alabama, 1981. Killed his wife on Halloween 1976. Also murdered his mother-in-law and a college student at the same house. Judge said the brutality justified it.
10,000 years plus 2 life terms. So let's say you, for some reason, you get through the 10,000 years and you die once. You still got to go to jail when you come back to life reincarnated? Damn.
Denied parole 9 times. 3. Darren Benelford Anderson, Styrick, 11,750 years, Oklahoma, 1994. Same case as McLaurin. First jury gave 2,250 years. He appealed, won a retrial. Second jury bumped it to 11,750. The biggest increase on appeal in U.S. history. S.A. of an elderly woman.
Oh, that's
larceny,
not lost on me.
Kidnapping.
Oh, so he get the biggest increase in history, huh? Okay.
Biggest increase on appeal in U.S. history. S.A. of an elderly woman. Larceny. Kidnapping. 2. Alan Wayne McLaurin, 20,750 years. Oklahoma, 1994. Accomplice of Darren Anderson in the S.A. Robbery and kidnapping of an elderly Tulsa woman. Originally 21,250. Cut by 500 on appeal. 1.
They did not disrespect that man by cutting his sentence down by 500. That is tough, man. They sat up here in your face and told you that he went up to appeal. Hold up, the other dude had thousands of years and got out after 17. So he went to appeal and got 500 years off 11,000. Man, the brothers just gonna get it either way, huh? You gonna get the most extreme overkill. You're gonna get the most extreme laugh in your face. Yeah, well, you parole 500 years off. The hell? Then they done gave my man 30,000. Like what? Like that? I don't even know what kind of point that proves. Yeah, that sounds really racial. That sounds really racial.
Charles Scott Robinson, 30,000 years.
Wow.
Oklahoma, 1994. 6 counts of SA of a young girl. Jury gave him 5,000 years per count. Still the U.S. record for a single person on multiple counts. This video
30,000 years. You might as well have, man. What happened to the death penalty? Steven, I mean, come on, man. Come on, man. Cut me down by 500 years, bro. Come on, bro. Just do me in or something, man. All right, I'm saving the big states for another broadcast because I can't do them all. But let's see what's going on in New Jersey.
Prisons. New Jersey's prison system holds some of the most infamous convicted killers in the country. From serial murderers whose crimes stretched across decades, to inmates responsible for cases that changed state and federal law. Here are 10 of the most notorious inmates serving New Jersey prison sentences. Number 10, Bruce Duett. Bruce Duett was already serving time for serious violent offenses when his record became even darker. In 2022, while incarcerated at Bayside State Prison, Duett killed fellow prisoner Martin Sanchez. A jury convicted him of first-degree murder in 2025, and he received an additional life sentence, ordered to run consecutively to his existing prison terms. Number 9, Richard Rogers. Known as the Last Call Killer, Richard Rogers was convicted of murdering 2 men whose disappearances were connected to New York nightlife during the early 1990s. Advances in forensic fingerprint technology eventually helped investigators identify Rogers years later. He was convicted in 2005 and received 2 consecutive life sentences in New Jersey. Number 8, James Kotitich. James Kotitich already had a murder conviction in Florida before returning to New Jersey after his release. In 1982, he was convicted in connection with the murders of Amy Hoffman and Deirdre O'Brien in Morris County. Kotitich originally received a death sentence, but that punishment was later overturned and replaced with life imprisonment. He remains incarcerated in New Jersey. Number 7, Jesse Timandequas. Few New Jersey cases have had a greater impact on American law than the murder of 7-year-old Megan Conca in 1994. Jesse Timandequas, who had previous convictions involving children, was convicted of Megan's kidnapping and murder. The case helped inspire Megan's Law, requiring public notification concerning certain registered sex offenders. Originally sentenced to death, Timandequas' sentence became life without parole after New Jersey abolished the death penalty. Number 6, Anthony Balaam. Anthony Balaam became known as the Trenton Strangler. Between 1994 and 1996, 4 women were murdered in Trenton. Balaam was eventually arrested, convicted of 4 murders and other offenses, and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term so long that he is effectively expected to spend the remainder of his life behind bars. Number 5, Jerome Dennis. Jerome Dennis was released from prison in 1991 after serving roughly a decade for earlier violent crimes. Within months, authorities connected him to a series of killings around Newark and East Orange. Dennis eventually pleaded guilty to murdering 5 women and girls. He received multiple life sentences and is not scheduled to become eligible for parole until 2052. Number 4, Paul Canero. Paul Canero is one of the newest inmates on this list.
Canero.
In 2026, a jury convicted him of murdering his brother Keith Canero, Keith's wife Jennifer, and their children Jesse and Sophia at their Colts Neck home in 2018. Prosecutors argued that financial problems between the brothers were behind the killings and that fires were set afterward in an attempt to conceal the crimes. In May 2026, Canero received 4 consecutive life sentences without parole. Number 3, Khalil Wheeler Weaver. Khalil Wheeler Weaver was only in his early 20s when investigators connected him to a string of attacks in northern New Jersey. A jury convicted him of murdering Sarah Butler, Robin West, and Joanne Brown, along with kidnapping and attempting to murder another woman who survived. In 2021, Wheeler Weaver was sentenced to 160 years in New Jersey State Prison. With more than a century required before parole eligibility. Number 2. Charles Cullen. Former nurse Charles Cullen became one of the most infamous healthcare killers in American history. Cullen admitted responsibility for dozens of patient deaths while working at hospitals in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. In New Jersey, he received 18 consecutive life sentences, followed by additional life sentences in Pennsylvania. He remains incarcerated at New Jersey State Prison, with no realistic possibility of ever being released. Number 1. Richard Cottingham.
Not Santa Claus.
At number 1 is Richard Cottingham, better known as the Torso Killer or Times Square Ripper. His crimes stretched across New Jersey and New York and remained under investigation decades after his original arrest in 1980. Cottingham has been convicted of multiple murders and has confessed to numerous additional killings under agreements with prosecutors. Even in January 2026, authorities announced that Cottingham had confessed to another New Jersey cold case murder dating back to 1965. He is serving multiple life sentences at Southwood State Prison.
Damn, Santa? Santa? All right. I think this will close it out. But let's talk about these females that's on death row. Let's talk about the females that's on death row. What they on death row for?
This video will cover the women on death row for killing their children. Case 1, Darlie Routier. In 1997, Texas sentenced her to death for the brutal stabbing of her 5-year-old son, Damon.
What?
Her 6-year-old son, Devin, was also killed. From day one, Routier has maintained her absolute innocence. She claims a knife-wielding intruder broke in, attacked her family, and slipped out through the garage. But prosecutors told a different story. They used a video of her smiling and spraying silly string at her son's grave to argue she lacked real grief, claiming she staged the crime to escape financial pressure. Today, she remains on death row as her lawyers fight for advanced DNA testing on an unidentified bloody fingerprint left at the scene. Case 2, Melissa Lucio, whose case nearly ended in execution just a few years ago. Convicted in 2008 for the capital murder of her 2-year-old daughter, Mariah, Lucio's entire conviction rested heavily on a statement she gave police. Investigators interrogating her for 5 grueling hours immediately following her daughter's death claimed she confessed. However, groups like the Innocence Project case profile stepped in, proving Lucio was a lifelong survivor of severe domestic abuse, making her uniquely vulnerable to a coerced confession under intense pressure. Modern forensic specialists now argue Mariah's death wasn't a homicide at all, but rather the tragic result of an accidental fall down a flight of stairs days prior, complicated by an undiagnosed medical issue. Her execution was halted in 2022 to review this new evidence, keeping her case highly contested. Case 3. In California, we find the tragic and violent case of Socorro Caro. In 1999, amidst a bitter toxic breakdown of her marriage, Caro shot 3 of her 4 young sons in their beds before turning the handgun on herself. She survived the self-inflicted head injury and went to trial. Her legal team aggressively fought the charges, arguing that she was locked in a state of severe clinical depression, completely fueled by heavy prescription medications and dark delusions. They claimed she wasn't in her right mind, but prosecutors focused strictly on the hard forensics. Crime lab analysts proved her clothing was covered in incriminating trace evidence that mapped out the steps of the crime perfectly. The courts ultimately rejected her appeals, and her death sentence was upheld. Case 4 takes us to Alabama, showcasing a purely financial motive. Christy Michelle Scott was condemned to death in 2009 for intentionally burning down her home to kill her 6-year-old son, Mason.
Damn.
Investigators discovered she committed the arson strictly to cash out on life insurance policies she had taken out on the child. Interestingly, the jury in her case actually recommended a sentence of life without parole. However, the trial judge used a controversial legal override to bypass the jury's wishes and handed her the death penalty anyway. Case 5. Back in Alabama, Heather Level Keaton became the first woman in Mobile County history to land on death row. In 2015, she was condemned for the torturous murders of her common-law husband's 2 toddlers, 3-year-old Chase and 4-year-old Natalie. The details were horrific. Investigators proved that Level Keaton locked the toddlers in cramped closets for hours and routinely starved them. She ultimately poisoned their food with antifreeze and choked them.
Damn.
Despite multiple appeals, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to review her case, keeping her on death row. Case 6. Maternal violence isn't limited to biological parents. Alabama inmate Patricia Blackman arrived on death row in 2002 and for the brutal slaying of her 28-month-old adoptive daughter, Dominiqua. Blackman claimed the toddler accidentally fell, but medical examiners completely shattered her alibi. The autopsy revealed the child died from massive blunt force trauma, sustaining a fractured leg, broken ribs, and severe internal damage while under Blackman's sole care. The state ruled it a case of fatal intentional abuse. This video will...
That's boy. Hey man, this rapid fire is what it do. I'm glad I was able to bring it to you. If you are new here and this is your first time tapping in, we do late night crime streams all the time. So if I could get you to just smash the like button and subscribe that thing one time, and the next time you come back to watch some crime and you don't want to see the picture all small, we got 2 streams. So you can subscribe, go to the channel, and then you can watch the landscape version where you can actually see all the people in both chats, right? See the people in both chats, and then everybody can be in the community together. But I ain't gonna hold you, but I'm emoji, fold you, and scold you about being on code, and you know I got 4 words for you. First of all, y'all need to, first thing you need to do is check out my new crime tee. I got a new crime t-shirt, y'all. It's stay alive, don't get murdered, okay? You get the link to the t-shirts is in the description, as well as the shirt is on my YouTube store. So if y'all want to support the channel, y'all go get that. I got it in a couple different colors. You know what I'm saying? If you don't, got it in the pink for the ladies, got it for the blue, got it for the red, and I got it for the white. You know what I'm saying? All the different colors right now. I got the code LOVE that'll get you free shipping. If you put in the code TWOFER, that'll get you $3 off your order. And then I had another code, but it was only 10% off, so the other one's better. But the code LOVE and the code TWOFER, right? Or if you want to get the 10% off your whole order, if you're buying multiple orders, you could use the code EARLYBIRD, and that'll get you 10% off. You heard? But 4 words before I let you go. I need you to go ahead and subscribe for the vibes, like for the spike in the algorithm, comment your vomit, share if you care about getting crime everywhere. Please do that on the platforms that you own, Jones. And just to bring it on home, I got love, peace, blessings, and aloha. I'm out the Doha for Shoha. You already know.